The board met this morning in Redwood City and conducted all of its other business scheduled for today. The final item of business on the board's agenda today is a consideration of the Mid-Coast Local Coastal Program Update Project. The board is holding this meeting here in Half Moon Bay on this issue. Let me give some background information in terms of the process for today and how we will be proceeding this afternoon. We're going to begin with a brief report from our Environmental Services Agency, the Planning Division, who will provide an update on the issues that we are reviewing. We will then open a public hearing. Anyone who wishes to speak during the public hearing needs to fill out one of these speaker slips. Everyone who wishes to speak will be granted 2 minutes. We will be working, the clerk will have a timer, and we will ask you to wrap up within a 2-minute time frame. When I do get to the point of calling speakers, I will identify probably 2 or 3 people in succession so that folks can line up and be ready to speak. We have, I haven't counted them yet, but it's a good sizable handful of speakers. We will continue this public hearing until either we have heard from everyone who is asked to speak or until it is 5 o'clock. At 5 o'clock, we will be adjourning this meeting. And if at that point there are folks that we have not yet reached in this list of speakers, they will be eligible to come to the Board of Supervisors meeting next Tuesday morning to continue testimony. The board does not plan or expect to take any action today on any of these matters. This is simply an opportunity for the board and the public to hear the staff report, and then for the board to hear from the public as it would relate to the items that are under consideration and that will, at a future date, be considered by the board. And as we get to the end of this meeting today, there will be a brief discussion about next steps in this process. But we anticipate having this item again on our agenda next Tuesday morning in Redwood City. And I think there's a likelihood that this will also be further considered after the first of the year when the board reconvenes in January. With that, let me introduce George Bergman, who has been the staff person working on this project for the last several years. The organization of this report is such that there are 23 items and 23 issues that the board is being asked to consider relative to specific updates of sections of the local coastal plan. George is going to provide a brief overview and provide some basic information. We'll see if the board members have any questions, and then we'll open the public hearing. George?
Thank you. Mr. President and members of the board, good afternoon. Today's item is the continued consideration of the Mid-Coast LCP Update Project. To date, your board has held 6 public hearings to consider this project. You have taken tentative action on some policy proposals while postponing action on others pending additional work. The project is intended to update Mid-Coast planning policy in order to guide the community's remaining growth. Aside from updating Mid-Coast build-out infrastructure data, the project's key topics include revising the allowed rate of residential development, assuring infrastructure capacity to serve build-out, reducing opportunities to exceed LCP build-out, controlling development on non-conforming parcels, controlling residential uses in non-residential zoning districts, increasing Mid-Coast commercial employment opportunities, and updating development controls for Mid-Coast rural areas. Last spring, you appointed a subcommittee consisting of Supervisors Gordon and Hill to assist in developing a set of principles and to recommend policy changes that align with these principles. During the summer, the subcommittee met with staff frequently to discuss the project and to develop recommendations. The first topic I will discuss relates to infrastructure demand at build-out. Regarding water supply, we've determined that both Coastside County Water District and Montero Water and Sanitary District do not have sufficient water capacity to serve build-out. Specifically, CCWD, whose mid-coast area is shown towards the bottom of the map with the red stripes, has the water supply to serve approximately 90% of build-out, but its delivery facilities need to be expanded, and this is known as Phase 2 expansion. On the other hand, Montero Water and Sanitary District, whose area is shown with the blue-green stripes, has the water supply to serve about 2/3 of its demand and is currently seeking new water sources. Regarding wastewater treatment, the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side has sufficient capacity to serve build-out and has made major improvements to control wet weather overflow. Turning to transportation, the most congested segments of highways 1 and 92 during peak hours will be at either level E or service level E or F in 2010. This is more congested than what is acceptable to the LCP, which considers service level D as acceptable. The subcommittee recommends that your board complete the ongoing Mid-Coast groundwater study, that your board supports the Coastside County Water District and Montero Water and Sanitary District in securing new water sources and applying for facility expansion to serve Mid-Coast build-out, and that you coordinate with the Transportation Authority and the City of Half Moon Bay to identify post-2008 Highway 1 road improvements. There's funding through Measure A funds that haven't been allocated. Well, they've been allocated, but the exact work hasn't been designed or determined for post-2008. And finally, the subcommittee recommends that your board revise LCP policy to allow up to 4 lanes for Highway 1 within the urban Mid-Coast area to achieve acceptable levels of service. The second topic relates to the annual limit on residential units in the Mid-Coast. The LCP currently limits Mid-Coast residential growth to 125 units per year. This is a community-wide limit that applies to all residential units except affordable housing and second units. Although 125 units a year are permitted, the historic growth rate for the past 20-plus years has averaged about 52 units per year. The Planning Commission recommends a 1% population growth rate limit, which equates to 40 units for this year and would increase marginally upward. The Commission also recommends dividing the limit amongst the individual Mid-Coast communities. The subcommittee recommends that your board reduce the limit from 125 to 75 units per year, that your board do not establish community sublimits, not distribute the 75 amongst the individual communities, so each community has its own limit. Also, that your board continue to exempt affordable housing. The subcommittee is recommending an additional exemption for units that are occupied by disabled persons and their caretakers. Meaning this would be an exemption from the 75 units a year that the subcommittee is recommending. And finally, the last bullet is a bookkeeping exercise to clarify that the limit applies to number of units and not number of building permits. The next topic relates to merging residential substandard lots. Here we are speaking of subdivided lots that are smaller than the minimum parcel size and are typically 2,500 to 3,000 square feet. Lot merger is a process where 2 or more contiguous, commonly owned substandard lots are combined into a single parcel. Lot merger usually occurs when one lot is vacant and smaller than 5,000 square feet, and lot merger serves to prevent unanticipated development that would exceed LCP build-out and density. Previously, your board asked that we explore incentives for voluntary mergers. In response, the subcommittee recommends a two-phased merger proposal where during phase one, incentives are offered for voluntary lot merger, and then during phase two, after phase one, the county would merge the remaining subdivided lots that were not voluntarily merged during phase one. Specifically, for an 18-month phase one period, the incentives that the subcommittee is recommending would be one of the bullets shown under phase one at the discretion of the property owner, either up to a 250 square foot bonus floor area, a approximate 5% reduction in building permit fees, or up to one covered space reduction in parking, off-street parking, and then for an affordable unit, if that is proposed on the merged parcel, all of the above. And this would be in the form of a voucher that the county would be issuing. It's not that all of the owners would have to take advantage and build right away. It would be within the context of the 75 units a year. So again, just to summarize, your board had asked that we look at voluntary approaches with incentives before considering mandatory. What the subcommittee is proposing is a hybrid that incorporates voluntary elements with incentives, but when the voluntary merger doesn't occur, there'd be a follow-up with mandatory merger. The next item relates to residential units in the C1 Neighborhood Commercial District, which is shown as the red islands on the screen. Currently, the C1 district allows residential uses subject to a use permit, and there's no requirement that there even be a commercial use on the property. The Planning Commission recommends limiting residential uses to above the first floor, and then residential floor area not exceeding commercial floor area. The Commission also recommends reducing the height limit from 36 to 28 feet. The subcommittee recommends, and also recommends, much like the Commission, that residential units be restricted to above the first floor, thus dedicating the first floor for commercial activities. But the subcommittee also recommends measures to provide flexibility for the non-ground floor or upstairs residential units. And these are the flexibility that the subcommittee is proposing would be that residential floor area would not be tied to the commercial floor area, and that the property owner would have an option to observe a 28-foot height limit where 36 is required, but not have to observe the front setback for the residential unit above, or observe a 32-foot height limit, but maintain the front yard setback. So basically, the subcommittee is recommending the main thrust of the Planning Commission's proposal, which was reserve commercial for the ground floor, bring residential upstairs, and allow it only upstairs. But the subcommittee is also recommending some flexibility for the residential units that would be upstairs. The next topic relates to allowing single-family residence at what is known as the Burnham Strip. It's a 14-acre, generally open area between Highway 1 and El Granada, and is currently zoned COSC. The Burnham Strip is shown as green. It's at the base of El Granada. It's shown as green on the screen. The existing COSC zoning permits nurseries, recreation units, institutional facilities, and one-story single-family residences. Currently, there are 11 parcels, 2 of which are developed, one with a residence and one with a school, and the remaining 9 parcels are vacant. The Planning Commission recommends that all residential units be prohibited in this area, or more specifically, where now a one-story house would be allowed. The Planning Commission is recommending that a house would be prohibited in this area. Instead of completely permitting or prohibiting houses, the subcommittee recommends a divided approach, whereby the northern portion of the Burnham Strip, which is shown in light green on the screen, or muted green on the screen, the proposal would be to rezone that area to RMCZ and continue to allow one-story houses in the green area where you predominantly have smaller lots. For the southern portion of the Burnham Strip, which is shown in a mustard color, the subcommittee recommends that for this area, residential units would be prohibited, and that a new zoning district, the EG zoning district, which would be El Granada Gateway, since this is sometimes informally known as the Gateway to El Granada, would be adopted, and the proposed EG zoning district would allow feasible non-residential uses that would be suitable for the larger lots that are found in the mustard area, which include temporary outdoor sales like farmers markets and flea markets, low-impact outdoor theaters, and sports grounds. So basically, to summarize, the current zoning of COSC is shown in blue. Various low-impact non-residential uses are allowed, but one-story houses are allowed. The Planning Commission says not allow one-story houses for the entire blue area. The subcommittee is recommending a divided approach where in the green area we have smaller lots and more suitable for housing, or are less suitable for the non-residential units. One-story houses will continue to be allowed in the green area, but not allowed in the mustard area. We have larger lots that could accommodate the non-residential units. The next topic relates to increasing commercial and employment opportunities in the Mid-Coast. Local job creation can reduce commuter congestion and increase the local tax base. As shown on the screen, the candidate areas for new uses are the inland area at Princeton, which is shown in blue, and 2 Half Moon Bay airport sites that are shown in orange that have been deemed not necessary for airport-related activities. Last spring, your board tentatively approved postponing any changes at these sites until Half Moon Bay Airport planning and safety studies were completed. As a slightly different approach, the subcommittee recommends that your board identify the new employment-generating uses now, but hold off taking final action on these changes until the airport planning studies are complete. More specifically, the subcommittee recommends adding new permitted uses for the inland area of Princeton, which was the blue area, as shown on the screen. And these would be 6 new uses, some of which would be limited in size. First one would be R&D facilities, research and development facilities, where each establishment would not be able to exceed 10,000 square feet floor area. Indoor-outdoor wholesale businesses, again with the 10,000 square foot limit. All types of offices, administrative, professional, and business offices with a 5,000 square foot limit per business. And indoor retail sales, repair, and rental, 3,000 square foot per business. However, if the goods are made on site, there would not be a limit on the business size. In addition, there'd be construction, trade, and maintenance businesses. These would be like offices for contractors and tradespeople, and there would not be a limit on size, and as well artist studios. The reason the subcommittee was proposing limits on size is to prevent huge office complexes like a Genentech moving out to take it over all of the Princeton area, or having a huge Costco out there. So that there are limits being proposed for the type of business. For the sites at Half Moon Bay Airport, the subcommittee recommends enacting a new airport commercial zoning district that allows the uses that are shown on the screen. This would be a wide array of commercial uses, including indoor-outdoor retail, rental, and repair businesses, food and beverage stores, personal convenience, service establishments, restaurants, again, the full array of offices, financial institutions, and medical offices. The next topic relates to the AO, or Airport Overlay Zoning District. The AO zone was established to reduce risk from aircraft accidents near Half Moon Bay Airport. Currently, the AO zone regulations prohibit residential development in the AO zone and limit site intensity to 3 persons per parcel. Approximately 3/4 of the AO zone is also within FAA and ALUC safety protection zones, and that is the greater area that's shown in blue. While the remaining quarter of the AO zone, which is farthest from the runway and shown in stripes, are not regulated by the FAA or ALUC. Last spring, your board again tentatively approved postponing any changes until the airport planning is complete. Here again, the subcommittee recommends that your board identify the proposed AO district changes now and hold off on taking final action until the airport planning is complete. Specifically, the subcommittee recommends reducing the size of the AO zone to eliminate the striped area and thereby aligning what remains AO with the same areas that are protected by the Federal Aeronautics Administration, Aviation Administration, and ALUC, Airport Planning Regional Agency. So basically, the striped area would be removed from AO, the AO district regulations, and what remains is the blue area, and that would be the only area that would be AO, and it would be consistent with the other airport safety or agency protection areas. The subcommittee also recommends amending the site intensity limit from 3 persons per parcel in the AO zone to 1 person per 1,667 square feet of parcel size, which is equivalent to 3 persons per 5,000 square feet. What this means is right now, it's a more qualitative or subjective type standard. It says 3 persons per parcels, but sometimes you have small parcels, sometimes you have big parcels, and they're each limited to 3 persons. What we did is try to standardize it in a uniform way, and what the subcommittee is recommending is we base it on 3 persons per 5,000 square feet, and then increments upward based on that density. The next topic relates to mid-coast traffic mitigation requirements. In this regard, the county currently requires traffic mitigation fees to ensure that new development contributes to the cost of local roads. In addition, CK policy requires transportation demand measures, or TDMs, for new development generating more than 100 peak hour trips. TDMs typically involve establishing shuttle service or van pools, subsidizing transit, or charging for employee parking. The subcommittee recommends that your board tentatively approve requiring TDMs for projects that generate 50 or more peak hour trips, whereas CK, the requirement kicks in at 100 or more presently. The subcommittee is saying lower it to 50 and above. And the effect of this would be to augment the existing county and CK's existing requirements, which taken collectively should improve and not further degrade mid-coast traffic flow principally on main roads. The next topic relates to the LCP rural residential designation. The rural residential area joins Montera, as shown on the screen, with the purple or violet boundary. This area is an anomaly in that it includes parcels that are served by public water lines, although LCP policy typically prohibits utility service into the rural area. The Planning Commission recommends redesignating the orange shaded areas from rural residential to rural, since these areas are currently not being served by water lines, and the effect of such change would preclude future extension of utility lines into this area. Said simply, within the purple area, water lines extend. This is a rural area. Where the orange-colored parcels are, those are vacant parcels where water lines have not yet been extended. What the Planning Commission is recommending is rezoning the orange areas out of this area so water lines or sewer lines could never go in there. The subcommittee disagrees with this approach and recommends that your board not change the rural residential boundary, that is, maintain the status quo, primarily since all of the parcels are located within and assessed fees by the utility district, and the land use potential of these parcels would be preserved by keeping the status quo, since many of them are very small parcels and without a utility line building would probably not occur. The next topic relates to lot merger in the rural mid-coast areas. The Planning Commission recommends merging all applicable parcels, typically smaller than 1 acre, with the goal of combining up to at least 5 acre parcels. In contrast, the subcommittee recommends merging only substandard lots and not parcels larger than 5,000 square feet. The subcommittee also recommends that merger follow the same two-phased approach that I explained previously for the urban area, where incentives are offered for voluntary merger followed by mandatory merger. And the map that's on the screen shows where the substandard lots in the rural area of the project area are located vis-a-vis, it's the brown shaded areas under the subcommittee's proposal that would be candidate areas for merger. This is where the substandard lots are in the rural area. The next topic, and almost last, relates to the Caltrans Devil Slide Bypass property, which is a corridor of state-owned land crossing the east side of Montera, as shown on the screen. The property was once earmarked for highway development to replace crossing Devil Slide. However, the bypass land is currently not needed for a highway since a tunnel is being constructed through Montera Mountain. The bypass property is mostly comprised of substandard lots and includes land zoned for single-family residences on 5,000 square foot parcels. The Planning Commission recommends promoting and planning low-intensity recreation uses for the bypass property, including changing the land use designation from residential to open space. Caltrans, which owns this land, has indicated that it prefers not to discuss plans for the bypass property until the tunnel is complete. The subcommittee endorses coordinating with Caltrans, and as such, the subcommittee recommends that your board postpone consideration of proposals to redesignate, rezone, or merge within the bypass property until the tunnel is complete. At previous hearings, there has been discussion about improving the county's policies to encourage affordable housing in the Mid-Coast. The subcommittee also explored this issue and has proposed several policy changes. And there are more policy changes indicated in the staff report. I'm going to focus in on three. These are the three that are shown on the screen that are intended to be combined with our existing affordable housing policies. This isn't the first effort at affordable housing. This county has been working over the last 20 plus years to facilitate affordable housing, including in the Mid-Coast. The subcommittee is recommending a few additions. One is to revise LCP policy to reserve water supply and sewage treatment capacity for all affordable housing units. What this means is there is reserved sewer capacity for development on the 3 designated affordable housing sites. Anyone who develops those sites can get in the front of the line and get capacity that's waiting for them. But if you choose to provide affordable housing in any other way other than at the affordable housing sites, vis-a-vis if you wanted to build voluntarily an affordable unit on your parcel, currently you wouldn't have access to the reserved water and sewage capacity. So the subcommittee is recommending that there be access to the reserved water supply and sewage capacity for all forms of affordable housing that comes about in any way, not solely through the designated sites. The second change that the subcommittee is recommending is to require that all second units be established as affordable units subject to income and rent limits. And finally, the subcommittee is recommending that your board revise LCP policy to offer incentives for developing the higher end of affordability, a moderate income house on a substandard lot. Earlier in this process, I had informed that there were about 270 residential substandard lots that cannot be merged, that are in single ownership. This policy to set up incentives are directed at those single substandard lots that cannot be merged, and those lots become an emphasis for providing affordable housing. And the types of incentives that the subcommittee are recommending are up to a 200 square foot garage floor area bonus, the ability to obtain priority reserve water and sewer a priority water and sewer connection, to waive permit fees and expedite the permit processing, to the extent feasible, offer direct access to an county-assembled pool of pre-qualified buyers for the affordable unit, and to the extent feasible, receive an interest-free or reduced interest loan for construction costs. What I'm saying is if you take all of these in the aggregate as incentives, the subcommittee is proposing that one target for providing affordable housing in the Mid-Coast, in addition to the designated sites, are these individual substandard lots that cannot be merged. And if someone proposes affordable housing, these are incentives to lead them to that decision. So that would conclude my presentation. In closing, staff recommends that your board at, I imagine would be a future date, as Supervisor Gordon had indicated, that your board take tentative action for the remaining project topics, and that you direct staff to prepare the final LCP amendment text, which would be the actual ordinance and implementation language, for final approval and transmittal to the Coastal Commission. That would be at a separate date. Said simply, you've taken tentative action on a small part of this project. You're yet to take tentative action on the balance of this project. Once you take tentative action on the entire project, we're requesting that you direct us to develop the exact ordinance and policy and the implementation measures, so we can come back to you for final approval, and then we would submit it to the Coastal Commission. And that would conclude my staff presentation.
Thank you. Let me ask members of the board if there are any questions of George at this point.
Thank you.
Okay, seeing none, we will open now the public hearing. And a reminder for those who came in after I made this initial announcement, everyone will be limited to 2 minutes. We will continue today until all public testimony has been taken, or until we reach 5 o'clock. If we reach 5 o'clock and there are folks who have not yet had a chance to speak, they will be invited to join us next Tuesday in Redwood City to provide their oral testimony or to provide written testimony. I'm going to call a couple folks at a time and ask that you kind of line up so that we can keep this moving. It will help everyone have an opportunity. And the clerk will have a timer, and we'll keep you to the 2 minutes. We're going to start with Jack Olson, to be followed by Sandy Emerson.
Good morning, President Gordon, members of the board. Thank you for convening over here on the coast and making this a little easier, but for me it's a little rough because I have to leave from here and go back to Monterey. We're engaged in the middle of the 87th annual meeting of the California Farm Bureau and are getting ready to, for the first time in 8 years, change our whole leadership structure by having our current president termed out and hopefully seeing our first and second vice moving up. And as of this morning, there were 5 viable candidates for the office of second vice, so it could be somewhat interesting tonight. And as another aside, the House of Delegates and the Executive Committee and Board of the California Farm Bureau have chosen San Mateo County as the site for the 90th annual meeting in 2008 at the Hyatt Regency Burlingame. So we're looking forward to being the host and showing California agriculture the best of what we have to offer in San Mateo County. Farm Bureau back in April offered a letter and offered an alternative solution relative to the deletion of timber harvesting, surface mining, oil and gas exploration, and solid waste facilities. And we reiterate that position. We would like to offer a 2-year time frame in which we would work with the affected parcels. Staff has assured us that it's a very limited number, and we would be willing to step up and convene meetings with these property owners and try to develop a conservation easement program that would essentially get us to the same place without having to have a legislative preclusion of these activities. And if we can't accomplish that in the 2-year time, we would then suggest that you go forward with a legislative preclusion, but we would like to ask for a 2-year time frame to try and develop an incentive-based voluntary program to accomplish the goals that you have directed staff to undertake. Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy Emerson, to be followed by Lindell Erb.
I'm Sandy Emerson. I'm an 8-year resident of El Granada, former member of the Mid-Coast Community Council. And I want to support the Mid-Coast Community Council and the Planning Commission recommendations as they were submitted, particularly the 1% population growth rate limit. The recommendations of the Planning Commission and the Mid-Coast Council were arrived at over a number of months with a lot of data and lots of extra time put in. And I must say that the subcommittee's recommendations are sometimes seem quite at variance with what the Planning Commission intended, and sometimes directed specially at specific projects. So in particular, I don't think that Highway 1 should be permitted to be widened to 4 lanes. I do not think it would improve the level of service on the roads. I think it would create just a sausage effect, and the level of service, which is challenged anyway, is best addressed by holding down the rate of growth. Also, the widening of Highway 1 to 4 lanes might conflict with the attempt to do the parallel trail for pedestrian safety. I am appreciative of the incentives for affordable housing on non-mergeable substandard lots. I think this is a good idea. I wish that there were also incentives to build small houses on standard lots. I don't think with the zoning for the Burnham Strip that the zoning needs to be changed to something special, thereby sacrificing part of the Burnham Strip. And I would support Caltrans addressing the use of the bypass land sooner than the end of the tunnel. Thank you.
Thank you. Before the next speaker, George, could you come and move the computer? Poor folks we're having trouble seeing them and they're having trouble seeing us. That's not going to work. While we do that, let me also just make, while George is doing that, a quick announcement. I want to thank MCTV, who is taping this meeting. All meetings of the Board of Supervisors are taped for rebroadcast. Normally in Redwood City, Peninsula Television provides that service. We're very grateful to MCTV for providing that service today. Their tape will be available countywide for all citizens of the county to see this meeting. So thank you to MCTV. Our next speaker is going to be Lindell Erb, followed by James Henderson.
Hi, I'm Lindell Erb. I'm here speaking for E-TRAC, which is the Equestrian Trail Riders Action Committee. We are quite concerned about this area as it's one of the few areas that has very good access to open horse trails, and the Caltrans property is a vital part of the trails in this area. Without that, we're going to end up with several stables that are ending up being essentially landlocked, and if you increase the size of Highway 1 to 4 lanes, it becomes increasingly dangerous for us to get to other areas off of the coast too. We've already had one horse killed on the part of Highway 1 that's 4 lanes because people weren't paying attention. So it's difficult to have horses in this community, and as you know, the people have quite a bit of impact on the community, and we're losing stables everywhere. So I am very much in favor of addressing the Caltrans land sooner rather than later and keeping it as open space as it is an existing trail and has been for many years. Thank you.
Thank you. James Henderson, followed by Jeffrey Davis.
Honorable Supervisors, I'm James Henderson of Half Moon Bay. I'm deeply saddened with the knowledge that apparently you are not embracing the recommendations of our County Planning Commission and the elected Mid-Coast Community Council concerning plans for growth on the San Mateo County coast. The proposed 2% annual growth rate is double that adopted by Half Moon Bay or Pacifica. I understand you support housing incentives that promote larger, more expensive homes on smaller lots and not the affordable housing promised in the staff report. I also understand that It is the desire of some to expand Highway 1 to 4 lanes in the populated areas with no concern for how folks who live here can get to the beach or even on and off the highway. So I would ask you to please enact a plan that will fit within the available resources of the coast. I believe that the infrastructure vision disregards valuable data and will have residents subsidizing future build-out instead of developers. And I would ask you to please follow the Planning Commission recommendations in this area. Please postpone approving development on the airport until after the new safety plan has been approved. To do otherwise is putting the answer before the question. And I would ask you to initiate talks with Caltrans as soon as possible on the right-of-way issue and revert the right-of-way to acreage immediately for the benefit of open space needs here on the coast. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jeffrey Davis, followed by Stephen Messino.
Hi, Jeffrey Davis, Montera. I am a member-elect to the Mid-Coast Community Council. Hopefully be sworn in next week. Thanks for coming out today. We appreciate you coming over the hill. I've talked to a lot of neighbors in the area, and the first thing that comes up with y'all coming over here is that, of course, a weekday scheduling is not quite adequate for these town hall meetings. A lot of folks couldn't be here today. They did have letters, and I brought them with me and would like to submit them. But just to give you an idea that, if this is a town hall meeting and you're trying to figure out what the people here really believe and how they're going to respond to the subcommittee's latest proposals, perhaps an evening meeting or something a little bit more appropriate for a blue-collar town, maybe in order. Having said all that, I would like to obviously place my support behind the MCC and the Planning Commission's original recommendations and the MCC's excellent response to the subcommittee's latest proposal, which I believe was submitted in the last couple days. Going over the everyone here is going to go point by point on the subcommittee's recommendations. I'm going to let most of them handle the details and recount the details. Again, my support is behind what's in the letter. But just in a general sense, there seem to be some serious problems that I think we've outlined in the Mid-Coast Community Council's response. There's some serious problems with the subcommittee's recommendations, not least of which is its seemingly scant relationship to the California Coastal Act, which it's supposed to represent, or which this LCP update is supposed to represent. We hope you take our letter and our response in consideration, and really look at what's right for the coast. The other thing that I'd like to bring up is about the right-of-way. To kind of kick that down the road for another 5 years is very difficult for us. We'd like for you to address that sooner rather than later. Thank you.
Thank you.
Letters to be submitted? Where?
To the clerk, please. Stephen Messino, followed by Matthew Clark.
Good afternoon. Thank you, supervisors, for allowing us to speak. I live in Montara, and I'd like to make some recommendations. I like the idea of the open space for the Caltrans. It's how it's always been used in the town from the town's inception. I would like to see it restored to that. If you could accelerate and get Caltrans to do it, it would be appreciated. Currently, I understand the build-out that you're looking for is aggressive. I have to tell you, if you live here, I've lived on the coast for 5 years, 30 years in San Mateo County. The commute in 5 years that I've lived in Montara, I could get to Half Moon Bay on my bicycle in rush hour faster. It really is quite slow. When I go into the city of San Francisco, which I have to do 2 days a week, in 5 years, my time to get through the town of Pacifica, which is through the first 3 lights, has increased 20 to 30 minutes, just by the number of people who are here. So please take that into consideration when you consider a build-out. The other element from Montara that was established is that we really we have limited capacity. You know about our water situation and our sewage, so please consider that and limit any expansion into that area unless the town members are willing to make an investment in the expansion. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Matthew Clark, followed by Don Johnson.
afternoon, Supervisors. I'm Matthew Clark. I'm the current president of the Granada Sanitary District Board of Directors, and I've been authorized by the District Board to speak to you here today. Thank you for this opportunity to comment on the LCP update project at this point. I have written copies of these comments I'd like to have included in the record. First, I note that at the District Board's request, our District Council has submitted a detailed letter of comment on the November 9th staff report, which I also request to have included in the record. As the District Board, other than providing excellent service at low rates, our primary focus of concern right now is wet weather sewage overflows. The staff report mentions that sewage treatment capacity is now sufficient for build-out, a point some would dispute. But our focus is on collection and transmission capacity, which is not addressed in that report at all, and is in fact a major concern as regards potential for wet weather overflows. As you know, state and federal regulatory agencies are moving forward with a policy of zero tolerance for such overflows, and the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side and its member agencies are taking steps to meet that requirement. Taken together, the LCP subcommittee recommendations, if implemented as the LCP update, will put the Granada Sanitary District in the bad position of perpetually trying to catch up on the need to prevent wet weather overflows. Due to engineering considerations, they would make current ratepayers subsidize ongoing development by building ahead to meet an increased residential build-out estimate, a probably ineffective and perhaps counterproductive merger policy for substandard lots, a higher growth rate limit than the average we've already been struggling to keep up with, greater potential need for sewer services in the C1 zoning district, more houses in what is now COFC zone land meant for community open space, and more and larger houses on substandard lots that would not even be counted in build-out. Further, if the subcommittee recommendations are adopted, the LCP update will create a situation where public agencies serving both the Mid-Coast and the City of Half Moon Bay, like ours, GSD, will have to work with two sets of rules, because the city's 1% annual growth rate and residential size proportionality rule will not be in effect in the Mid-Coast.
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Can I give you one more paragraph, please?
Quickly.
Finally, subcommittee recommendations would incentivize building bigger houses on substandard lots as affordable housing, while not counting those in build-out or the annual growth limit. But those same houses will impact our collection and transmission system and ultimately treatment capacity as well. This will add to the current problem of wet weather overflows we're trying to avoid. The subcommittee recommendations favor residential over other uses and will negatively affect our ability to prevent overflows. It is the Granada Sanitary District's policy that we would rather not spend ratepayers' money on fines for overflows when that same money should be going to prevent those same overflows. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Johnson, followed by Chris Thal.
Honorable Supervisors, thanks for hearing my comments. My name is Don Johnson. I live in Montero. And I appreciate you coming here to hold this meeting. There's a lot of my neighbors here to talk. There are even more who would be here, but they're over the hill working because there aren't jobs here to balance the housing. You'll meet them on the way over. They'll be in the oncoming lane, so wave to them as you pass. And please realize that that backup came about while we were adding 25 housing units per year in the Mid-Coast. Your proposal is to triple that. The City of Half Moon Bay, that city council that meets in this room, sits at that table, and those chairs have voted for a 1% raise. I'm not talking about no housing. I'm not a knee-jerk NIMBYist. I'm asking for balance. When you're proposing a growth rate that's double the growth rate that the people who live here vote for when they have a chance, something's not balanced. When you pass up the recommendations of the elected Mid-Coast Community Council, your Planning Commission, the testimony of hundreds of people who have participated for thousands of hours in this process over the last 4 or 5 years, and start over from scratch and ignore that, we have a problem. There's no do-over for my community. What we're going to decide here over the next several months will guide the growth of this community for 10 or 20 years. Walking away from the testimony of my fellow students, my fellow citizens, and the recommendations of elected bodies such as your own Planning Commission and the Half Moon Bay City Council, Pacifica City Council, ignoring their studies and experience, I believe is unwise, and I ask you to return to the recommendations of the Planning Commission and the Mid-Coast Community Council. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Tholog, followed by Stephen Lowens.
I appreciate the opportunity to comment to the board and appreciate your taking the time to come over. I'd like to comment on a transportation infrastructure issue. I have a lot of experience with infrastructure on the coast. I spent 8 years on the Monterey Sanitary District Board. I was the president of the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side during the last major plant expansion. And I was a very active participant, as Rich knows, with, and continue to be, with the Double Slide Tunnel Initiative. So I'm concerned that we're at LOSF, level of service F, on both major conduits into the coast side. And despite the good efforts to bring jobs over to the coast side and to do things like a park and ride facility, I don't think that there's any expectation that those things will change and improve that level of service. So I think it's really critical that the board consider the long-term ramifications of two issues. First, I think it's essential that we consolidate substandard lots. I think that inventory needs to be addressed, and in doing so you can affirm the development rights of the conforming lots, which I think is an important issue. Second, concerning the Caltrans right-of-way, I know how difficult it is to work with Caltrans. Believe me, I'm sympathetic. I would just ask that you maintain the position and do everything possible to ensure that when that property is disposed of, that it doesn't in turn become additional developable property that exacerbates the transportation issues. And again, thank you very much for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you. Stephen Lowens, followed by Terry Gossett.
Hello, thank you for hearing me. My name is Stephen Lowens. I'm in Montera. I represent a group called Monterans United Against Flooding. I prepared this letter and some pictures for your consideration. I've read the staff report, the November 9th report, and I find that it has a gaping hole. There is no mention whatever of stormwater management or flood control in that entire document. Likewise, there is no mention of those subjects in either your general plan or your community plans, all of which feed into this plan. I'm asking you to please think about taking stormwater management and flood control seriously and include it in all three of those documents. What you have at the present time is a system without public policy. You're the only county in the Bay Area that's doing it this way. The people that are suffering from this are the people whose homes border these streets. The pictures I show you are not the worst that it's been. This is when somebody was out there. Our flood channels are overflowing. The driveway pipes are actually smaller as you go downstream, so you lose capacity as you go downstream. Water is flowing over Hart Street into the channels and into the garages of people who live on the south side of the street. It's all because of a lack of policy. I'm asking you on behalf of the group to add what I think is a 24th point to your list, which is to add stormwater management and flood control to the general plan, to the community plan, and subsequently to the local coastal plan, so that the people at the bottom of the hill are not paying the price for the upcoming development.
Thank you. Terry Gossett, followed by Jan Gray.
Hello, Honorable Supervisors and staff. My name is Terry Gossett from Moss Beach, representing Californians for Property Rights. I wanted to thank you for a very fair, complete, and balanced Mid-Coast LCP update. I think the subcommittee is to be congratulated for all their work, including the staff. CPR has provided you with two separate letters, one with our recommendations and another is an analysis of arguments opposing the subcommittee recommendations. CPR supports your growth rate limit of 75 residential units and your plan to not count affordable housing toward the growth rate limits. However, CPR still has concerns with boundary issues associated with MWSD and Granada Sanitary District. Note that these two special districts are the only ones in the county without a map on the San Mateo County LAFCO website. I think something ought to be done about that. CPR remains very concerned with the inability of Monterey Water and Sanitary District to meet their infrastructure demand of this plan, so CPR has recommended a 5-member working group to report to this board to address this issue. I've attended nearly all of the Half Moon Bay, the Mid-Coast, and South Coast whenever they have meetings on LCP issues. And I'd like to, again, thank you for a very balanced plan. I think this is balanced in terms of matching problems and solution, growth and infrastructure, and people in the environment. And I do think it satisfies the Coastal Act as I read it. I've read it many times, I'm not an authority. But most of all, what I like about the plan is it's holistic, it's comprehensive, and it's fair to the people that live here. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Jan Gray, to be followed by Peter Grinnell.
Prior to my time, may I ask Mr. Bergman to put the Burnham Strip map back up for me? Thank you. All right. My name is Jan Gray. I'm a member of the San Mateo County Association of Realtors. I am on the Legislative Committee, and I'm speaking with regard to the Burnham Strip, specifically that colored mustard. Part of that strip does belong to the San Mateo County Harbor District, currently zoned community open space, referred to publicly as the Burnham Strip. There are 2 parcels there, and what we are asking is this not be zoned to the new designation, EG, because what Mr. Bergman left out of this is temporary sales, flea markets, etc., showgrounds, exhibition facilities, performing arts centers, sports facilities, driving ranges, miniature golf courses, and cemeteries. We are having a little problem with the cemetery. That would not be inducive of traffic, except the fact that people might be coming to visit the graves. However, the other uses, crowds, all of those uses would bring additional crowds. Parking, people need sewer and water, and that property is served by nothing. We are asking that the zoning remain the same as COSC, because we have determined that this parcel was created in 1953, prior to that 1981 date that would prohibit a single-family residence on it, or put it into the RMCZ, which would allow 1 residence. There is a certified appraisal for that particularly 6.19 acre parcel in excess of $1 million. And I guess we will allow Mr. Grinnell, the San Mateo County San Mateo County Harbor District General Manager, and the attorney to speak to the other issues. And I thank you for having your meetings on this side of the hill.
Thank you. Peter Grinnell, followed by Mark Zaffarano.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Peter Grinnell, General Manager, San Mateo County Harbor District. I'm speaking to one issue, and that is indeed the Burnham Strip. I'm going to run through these points as quickly as I can. Before I do so, I'd like to alert you, Harbor Commission President Sally Campbell is with me today, our General Counsel Mark Zaffarano, and Harbor Master Dan Tenko. We oppose the rezoning of the Burnham Strip, particularly that portion identified on pages 14 and 16, 9, D, 2, and 3. That's the mustard-colored area. 2, our basic concern is with just about everybody here, I believe, to preserve open space in this area, consistent with the COSC zoning. The present zoning provides for 90% of that 6.19 acres to remain open. Secondly, that existing zoning is, and the provision to allow 1 single-family residence, among a couple of things, would be consistent with the existing surrounding community as uses. Thirdly, it enables the Harbor District to carry out its fiduciary responsibilities, which the change in zoning would not. Effectively, the change to the new proposed EG zoning would eliminate all 3 of the points I just referred to. 4, The Board of Supervisors and the Harbor Commission, as you know, have the same countywide constituency. Changing the zoning caters to a comparatively small minority whose primary goal, open space, is, as I've just said, substantially achieved by the existing zoning, 90% of the existing lot. And losing that would disadvantage most of the rest of the county constituency. 5, Pillar Point Harbor serves coastside county and beyond. For example, 50% of Pillar Point Harbor tenants are from San Mateo County. We provided that information to LAFCO in our service review report. A change in zoning will significantly reduce the value of the median strip and reduce the Harbor District's ability to serve its broad constituency, including the coastside.
Mr. Grinnell, your time is up.
I would beg your indulgence, Mr. Chairman, in view of the fact that that parcel is owned by the Harbor District. We have a unique relationship. I'll be done in a minute if you...
I'm going to give you 30 seconds more. We're keeping everybody to 2 minutes, and that's everybody.
Okay. If downzoned, the district would be forced to consider relocating its administrative office to the Burnham Strip, which is now over in South City in rented space. We could conceivably go along with RMCZ zoning for the left side to allow one residence. Let me close by saying that leaving the zoning as is would also eliminate the current conflict as suggested by the Coastal Commission, who has a problem with RMCZ. A last thing, the county's consultant raised the question of whether alternative uses better serve the goals here than existing zoning. And years ago, we received a proposal to provide substantially the same thing, and that proposal was roundly criticized and discarded by the Harbor Commission.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Hill does have a question for you, though.
Yes.
You indicated that 91% of that new EG zoned area is open space.
Yes.
And you're talking about if we were changing it, it would still be open space. What is the intent of the Harbor District to do with it? What is your intent to use this property for?
Well, we have several options, ranging from putting our administrative office there, which fills into the category of opposition to any building on there from a lot of folks. Alternatively, we could sell it. Alternatively, we could try to do whatever we could to maximize the financial return to the Harbor District. This is our major fiscal concern here. This is an asset that's uncapitalized. And the Harbor District has debts to the state and development needs, and downzoning would eliminate that.
And so what you're saying is the 91% that would not be open space after you made those changes to it? What you're saying is that the 91% then would not be open space after you made those
well, we have
changes
to.
To it?
It may not be depending upon what the county would approve.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Yeah, but there's one last thing, and that's a question of location within the site. The proposed EG calls for that new type of development right in the middle opposite Portola Road. And whether that suits us or not, who knows?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Mark Zaffarano, followed by Zoe Kirsten Tucker.
Good afternoon, Mark Zaffarano. I'm the District Counsel for the San Mateo County Harbor District, and I'm a partner at the law firm of Aronson, Dickerson, Cohen, and Lanzone in San Carlos. As you know, the Harbor District operates Pillar Point Harbor on the coast, where no doubt some of you have bought fresh crabs during the holiday season, and they also operate Oyster Point Marina on the bayside. And as Mr. Grinnell indicated, the constituency of the district is identical to your constituency, that is all of the residents of the county. And the Harbor District is sworn to serve the interests of all of those county residents. I have only 3 brief points to make for you today. First of all, your staff has given you an opinion that the proposed downzoning of your sister public entity's property would not be a taking. I'll just suggest that the analysis of that question is, I think, somewhat more complex than is in your staff report, and I think as is indicated in other portions of the staff report on other items. But without going into detail, I think there's 2 main points to keep in mind. You've heard some testimony that the downzoning would make this property virtually valueless. And then second of all, that the proposed use would actually result in less desirable uses than are currently allowed by the current zoning. Second point is that you've relied on the opinion of an economist or a political scientist in your staff report and the Harbor District would actually request a copy of that report. We don't have it. It wasn't attached to the report, and we'd love to take a look at it. And then finally, I think it's important to note that the proposed action, if taken, would virtually eliminate the value of one of the district's main assets, as Mr. Grinnell indicated, an asset that belongs not to the few, but to the many hundreds of thousands of residents of the county. Looking back into the audience, I see that there are many residents wearing a sticker saying the coast belongs to everyone. The San Mateo County Harbor District agrees with that and trusts that you do as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Zoe Kirsten Tucker, followed by April Vargas.
Good afternoon. My name is Zoe Kirsten Tucker. I'm a resident of Moss Beach, and I'm speaking today as one of the vice presidents of the Committee for Green Foothills. My comments pertain specifically to the residential growth rate limit and the exemption of units for people with disabilities, which is on page 6 of the staff report, which I think you have. It's item 4B2. Specifically, I ask that you deny the subcommittee's recommendation to create new policy to add an exemption for residential units occupied by disabled persons and their caretakers. And here is my rationale. The development project known as CPALS, which is driving the recommendation for this special exemption, is unique and laudable in its goal to bring a residential facility to the coast for people with developmental disabilities. I want to be really clear about that. This is a very important project and would be an asset to our community. However, the developers are asking to site this residential facility on land which is not zoned for residential uses. To get around this problem, the subcommittee recommends that the county interpret any project that includes residential units, common facilities, and on-site job opportunities for disabled occupants and their caretakers as a contemporary hybrid of a rest home, sanitarium, and philanthropic institution. Hence, such a facility as CPALS will be permitted in all zoning districts within the framework of the existing regulations. The problem with this approach is that it creates an enticing incentive for other developers in the future to creatively misrepresent the intended uses of a property and thereby take advantage of the exemption from the annual growth rate limit for residential units. This is not in the best interest of our community. Furthermore, there's a fundamental inconsistency with this particular project. The developers want to place a residential facility on land zoned for industrial use and then take advantage of the existing zoning to exempt the development from the proposed impervious surface limit. We recognize that a residential facility of this type requires a parking lot. Oh, go on. Anyway, let me just say that we would instead recommend that the developers seek a separate and special LCP amendment for this particular project. This would ensure that it receives the special attention it deserves and removes the real possibility that policy created to serve this project would result in the unintended exploitation of coastal resources in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. April Vargas, followed by Catherine Slater-Carter.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. It's a pleasure to see all of you here. Thank you for coming over. I'm glad that we have a sunny day. My name is April Vargas. I live at 377 12th Street in Montero, and I'm speaking today as the other Vice President of the Committee for Green Foothills. I'm going to confine my comments. I believe that you all have received the committee's letter, and it takes usually about an hour to go through that in detail, so I'll save you that until I get the opportunity to speak with each of you individually. But I want to confine my comments right now to the lot merger. All of the issues that you've seen before you today and for the last 5 years hinge on the fact that the coast has limited capacity for infrastructure and needs to have a policy for growth that's controlled and responsible. Merging substandard lots is one very important way that many, if not all, of these objectives can be reached. Another important issue is the fact that the county currently has the ability to institute a lot merger program without a lengthy Coastal Commission review. The committee believes that it's within everyone's best interest to start the merger process as soon as possible. That being said, our examination of the specific way in which the subcommittee would like to move forward has us concerned. While having a voluntary process at the beginning, then rolling over to mandatory may seem like a fair way to do it. One problem that we've seen in the past is where some landowners will either trade or sell property to either a family member or a business associate, causing what's called checkerboarding. When they no longer own two lots right next to each other, then they no longer have to merge them. So part of the problem with the voluntary would be that this would actually encourage checkerboarding. One way quickly that this could be addressed is through monitoring, should the board decide to have a voluntary process. But if it becomes obvious that checkerboarding is occurring, then the mandatory process would immediately come into being, and then the voluntary program would be scrapped as a result of
All
that.
right, thank you very much. Catherine Slater-Carter, followed by Lisa Ketchum.
Good afternoon, members of the board. It's nice to have you on this side of the hill. It's nice that so many people could attend today, too. This is a true pleasure. I have spent the last couple days working on a letter to you from me as an individual, and Jerry, the copy I gave you yesterday, throw it up, it had some egregious typos in it when I reread it. So there's a nicer copy. In any event, for the most part, I have worked on the MCC recommendations, and I was at almost every single Planning Commission hearing. I support the Planning Commission recommendations and think that you would be doing the community, the coast, and the state a service to adopt them. The sewer plant was expanded, and the expansion was finished in 1999. In the 6 years since then, you have had the opportunity to see what the effects of growth at about the 1% rate would give. We have, as you have heard in testimony today, huge amounts of flooding in Montero, Moss Beach, and El Granada. We have ever increased traffic jams. And we have no parks yet, except those on the coast that the community has built. And to propose to double this rate, I think would be a mistake. I believe that what the purpose of this LCP update has been was to learn from the past. We do need a stormwater management system. I can't begin to tell you how deep the water is in front of some of these folks' houses, and the standard response from the county is to offer sandbags in Princeton. This is not a good thing for folks to take their car down, try and load them up with sandbags, and when you need 100 sandbags to protect your house, that's all you get. The traffic, there's a lot more detail in my letters. Again, I thank you for coming.
Thank you. Lisa Ketchum, followed by Susan Christine.
Good afternoon, President Gordon and Supervisors. Lisa Ketchum with the Pillar Ridge Homeowners Association. While our manufactured home community is under new ownership, challenges still remain. Water quality and availability at Pillar Ridge remain serious concerns. Our best option would be to join the Montero water system, but with policies in place that responsibly manage future growth in the mid-coast, this would be extremely difficult. Merging substandard lots and adopting a 1% annual growth rate will allow infrastructure improvements to keep pace with ever-increasing demands. Montero Water and Sanitary is committed to supplying water to future as well as current residents, and a sustainable level and rate of growth will make this goal far easier to achieve. Homeowners at Pillar Ridge are proud of the self-determination that the board has helped us to achieve, and want to remind you that we have the same concerns as any other group of residents. We want clean and healthy neighborhoods in which to raise our children and build a vibrant community. A safe and reliable supply of water is not a luxury item that we can live without. Please follow the recommendations of the Planning Commission, the Mid-Coast Community Council, and Committee for Green Foothills, among others, and institute a lot merger program and 1% annual growth rate as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Susan Christine, followed by Jeff Peck.
Hi, thanks for coming over here to meet with us. As I'm sitting here listening to everybody make such good points, I realize that I probably need a whole lot of time to address my concerns, but let me take a slightly different tack. I've lived in Montero since 97, and I've worked in the mental health industry, working with homeless people on psychiatric units, down and outers, just people who really needed a lot of help, and I've done this for over 31 years. And the only way I've been able to do it, the only possible way I could do it, is to live in a rural or semi-rural area. I come back from my shifts and I fill my soul up again. I'm asking you to not take this away from the people who need it to do their work, to live in the world. Not everyone is as sensitive as I am, I guess, because some people can live in concrete jungles, but I don't want to have to move from Montero eventually. I want to retire here with my husband. And 2 nights ago, there was an owl right across the street. And then I went out, I heard him again at midnight. My husband and I went out and we heard him around 9 o'clock, or her, and he went to bed. I heard him again, I went out, and there was a second owl. It sounded like it wasn't much more than 2 or 3 blocks away, slightly different. Thank you.
Jeff Heck, followed by Teresa McNaughton.
Yeah, hello. I just want to thank everybody for what you've done, and everything that you've shown us today, your recommendations, I do agree with. I do want to comment on the woman who just left the podium about her owl. Let me tell you something that strikes you more than an owl. That's when you're a parent of a developmentally disabled child, and you know when you're dead that nobody's there to take care of him or her. That's what haunts you every night, and it's much more haunting than an owl, and I love owls, believe me. So I'd like to make sure, which I think you've done in here, that our project, inadvertently called CPALS, a big wave that is approved. CPALS is the organization of 100 families, 400 to 500 people who have special needs kids, and they're behind that. I don't think we have to go through special zoning changes. Big Wave already concurs to the special use permits with the county wisely approved. So thank you for everything you did. One last thing, we want to encourage commercial and we want to encourage low-income housing here. I think you should really think about combining the two. If there is a commercial project which will facilitate a low-income housing project, I think that commercial project should be looked at as getting, say, for example, a priority water use. That way, the private industry is actually subsidizing the low-income housing. So try to look at everything in its totality and tell the private industry out there they have to come up with money to help the communities that are, and the people in the communities who are disabled and disadvantaged and are low income. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa McNaughton, followed by Lisa Buttar.
Hi. Well, those were 2 really tough acts to follow. Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Teresa McNaughton. I live in Montero. I want to thank you for making the trip over the hill today. However, I must also acknowledge that even with all the fabulous community turnout, there are many people who cannot attend today due to work or childcare. I myself begged my husband to come home early, had a girlfriend shuttle my son, so for me to be here really speaks to how important this project is to me. I'm not a lobbyist. I was actually at Fairlawn View Elementary this morning volunteering, and I can tell you how many other parents commented to me that they wish they could also be here today. So I strongly support an evening event if we could ever try and do that. Okay, so I support the Planning Commission's recommendations and the MCC's. I think that the coast is a unique place. People who live on the coast do so because we value its rural character and owls. We tolerate many inconveniences because we believe that the opportunity to enjoy the unique environment here outweighs the disadvantage. The coast is a gem and a recreational resource for people who live here and elsewhere in the Bay Area. The purpose of planning, I believe, is to control growth and development so they do not overburden infrastructure or destroy the character of communities. And I believe the proposal to add 3,000 additional housing units would do just that. The schools are a bit inadequate for the current student population. We received a letter from the principal of the elementary school several years ago in Montero requesting a support of a bond issue for necessary improvements to the school building itself. If the schools are not adequate to serve the current population, how can they possibly serve a population that is projected to approximately double in the next several years? I support reasonable growth, but doubling the rate about what the MCC recommends is outrageous. And I would also love to see the bypass considered sooner. Thank you so much for listening to me today.
Thank you. Lisa Hutar will be followed by Sue DeGree.
Good afternoon, and thank you for listening. I'm Lisa Hutar, and I'm a board member of CPALS, the organization that's been talked about that supports families and adult children with developmental disabilities. I'm also an attorney that works with a number of families that are trying to help their developmentally disabled individuals and their families plan to ensure that they have a quality life. And finally, I'm the parent of a 14-year-old son, Eric, who happens to have a developmental disability called Down syndrome. The single greatest concern that my clients have, and I've got to say that I have, is that I worry about the lack of affordable housing for my son. I also worry about the fact that he will be unable to drive, and without the ability to drive, if he finds affordable housing, there generally is no place for him to work. And so I support the exception to the limitation on growth in regard to affordable housing and housing for individuals with developmental disabilities. The project that Jeff Peck talked about, called the Big Wave Project, incorporates affordable housing for people with developmental disabilities, as well as opportunities for them to work without having to find transportation. I hope that you will also support that, and I thank you for listening to me today.
Thank you. Sue DeGree to be followed by Jules Sofer. Sue, I see that you put in 2 slips, but everybody gets to speak once.
Okay, I won't speak for myself. Okay. Well, who knows what I'm going to say next second. Anyway, welcome to the coast. I'm actually here on behalf of Parker, which advocates for those who have developmental disabilities. I'm also the parent of a young man who has Down syndrome, and I am a coastal resident in Pacifica. I concur with what the others have said regarding looking for affordable housing for those. And if you look at the Big Wave, I'm encouraging problem solving here because it certainly respect local community issues regarding growth control. These are coastal children who have grown here, have learned their way around this community, and we encourage, every community wants their child in their local community, so I'm looking to you to look at this as a sample of what can go on in every part of the county. For the coast, it absolutely protects and is part of the vision of the Coastal Act. It's affordable housing. It protects the coast. It does not add heavy traffic, probably very minimal traffic. And the employability part would be where they would be using visitor-serving, coastal-serving jobs. So it seems like everything I want. It's a superb thing, and I really encourage you to look for problem solving here and to look at this as a 21st century independence thing for those who have developmental disabilities. It wasn't too long ago when we farmed them out to Napa. We farmed them out to institutionalism where we did not encourage them to work, much less live on it as much as independently as possible. So I thank you all, and I thank the community for being open-minded and problem-solving and definitely protecting the coast in a strict manner. Thank you.
Thank you. Before you get to Mr. Sofer, I have a car that needs to be moved. Somebody is parked in the SBC space or SBC lot, maybe more than one of you apparently. The lot is to the left of the entrance of Shoreline Station. It's southwest of the community center, and they need that space for utility trucks. So if your car is parked there, you would please move it, otherwise they will be calling a tow company. We'll have Jerry needs to go move the car. We'll have Jules Sofer to be followed by Karen Rosenstein.
Joel Sofer, 536 Poplar in Half Moon Bay. I've lived in Half Moon Bay for 35 years, and I've had a retail business in Half Moon Bay for 29 years. In that time, I've seen it more and more difficult for folks from over the hill who wanted to come over here on weekends to see the coast. I've seen it become very difficult for them to do that on weekends. I don't see a solution. However, I noted that your 3,400 new units would involve about 10,000 more cars. And those 10,000 more cars, averaging 2.5 car trips, well, per car, well, five car trips per car, I think, is the usual. So you're talking about 50,000 more cars on Highway 1 and 92. In the 16-hour day, normally, because I suspect most of those cars are going to be used between 6:30 in the morning and 10:30 at night. That's a lot more cars that you're putting on our roads here. I'm not even talking about all of the other infrastructure that we are very stressed on. Water. I'm sure you've thought of all of that, and I'm sure your people have considered that. However, we're going to have to live with it. We're going to have to build a new high school. We're going to have to build a new middle school. We're going to have to do a lot of things over here that are going to cost us a lot of money. And you haven't even included this affordable housing in your figures. I think that should be considered because a lot of those people are going to be working if they're in affordable housing, and they're probably going to be working over the hill. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Rosenstein, followed by George Mutev.
Good afternoon, Honorable Supervisors. Karen Rosenstein, Chair of COPAN, which is Coalition of Pacifica Neighborhoods. I did a previous comments, particularly of the previous speaker, as well as the coastal preservation comments that you've already been hearing and will continue to be hearing today. I would like to mention and ask that Pacifica be included in the loop of all this decision making, because many mid-coasters travel on Highway 1 through Pacifica in the morning, impacting Pacifica's well-known traffic problems as well. In fact, I consider the traffic problem down here to be the wild card for Pacifica, because we cannot plan our resolution for traffic without having input here. So I would really like to make that point very, very clear, that Pacifica, as one of the outlets to Half Moon Bay, has to be taken into consideration. We need to address the problems that have been mentioned here before adding even more. We need to develop ways to more wisely use what infrastructure we do have here before adding any more coastal residential. We need to accept that we have limited resources here on the coast. We are already having an environmental negative impact on what we have available here, and we need to fix that. We need to fix for building more. Thank you.
Thank you. George Mutev, followed by Todd McGee.
Good afternoon. My name is George Mutev. I live at 408 Redondo Beach Road here in Half Moon Bay. I've lived here since April of 1979. Honorable Supervisors and staff, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for making the trip to our coast, affording people like me a chance to speak to this issue. First, let me say that based on my knowledge, you're on the right track, doing the right thing. You're exhibiting a good rough balance regarding my understanding of your proposal. I would ask that you not be swayed by extremists on one side or the other of center. To that end, I might show an example of what I'm referring to. I received an email yesterday from a friend over the hill that is yet another example of an attempt to strike fear into the recipients. This email was originated by Catherine Slater Carter, Special District Officer, and a member of the Mid-Coast Community Council here on the coast. It's full of accusations and innuendos with absolutely no data to back up the claims. It accuses your plan as, quote, outrageous, with your intent being, quote, to put as much housing here on the coast as possible. I've been studying the proposed Mid-Coast LCP update. I've found absolutely no evidence to support those claims. This is clearly an attempt to politically bully you. This is a policy debate. There's no room for that kind of sophomoric antics that I've described. I would ask that you continue to carefully consider the work that you're doing and keep the balance that you have offered to date, as what you decide will impact Half Moon Bay and in fact our entire coastside. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Todd McGee, followed by Ken King.
How many of you are taking time off of work today? How many of you know someone who couldn't take time off work today but wanted to come? I think that point is made. Thank you. Hi, my name is Todd McGee. Thanks for letting us come and holler at you. I bet it sucks to meet you. But it's pretty good to live over here. I live on 3rd Street, 315 3rd Street, with my now 4 children and wife, one of whom is a 5-year-old, whom I walk to Fairlawn View School every day. 3rd Street's a pretty typical Montero street. We have a ditch on one side. We have a road that's exactly as wide as it needs to be for 2 cars to pass, plus maybe an inch or 2 for nervous drivers, and a ditch on the other side. On any given morning, we walk to school, and there's about 6 cars parked in the roadway. And that is to say, they drove up to the front of their house, and they parked there. And now, when we come walk along, we walk out into the middle of the road. Hopefully it's not been raining. We're not being splashed by puddles. Generally speaking, that's not true. And so we are in the roadway. We don't have an option because there's a ditch on either side of the road. So we can walk in a ditch or we can walk in the middle of the blasted road. The idea of offering incentives for affordable housing that would reduce the requirement for off-street parking will only make this worse. It does not serve anyone well. And I ask you to reject that, specifically reject that. I'd also ask you to reconsider the idea to double the number of homes. And very briefly, bullet points, I'd like to ask that any Highway 1 expansion project, which I don't think is a very good idea, but any Highway 1 expansion project should encompass planning for pedestrian and recreation usage, because our kids have to get around. Right now, there's no way for a kid to get from Moss Beach to Montero except by riding on the highway. Okay? There's 6-year-old kids riding bicycles on the highway at 7 o'clock in the morning. I see them every day, and we need to give them a recreational path. And I do thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ken King, followed by Karen Wilson.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Ken King. I'm a resident of Half Moon Bay, and I want to say that I moved here in 1975, and I did it because it was close to where I worked in Belmont. It was 18 minutes from my driveway to work in those days. When I retired, because I couldn't stand the commute anymore from Belmont. It was 45 minutes one way, and it was an hour the other way. And I didn't retire because I was rich. I just retired because I thought life wasn't worth that. And you know, it's nice to see you here on time at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If this meeting had been at 6 p.m., I wonder how many of you would have been here on time. It would have been a challenge. And I heard Mr. Bergman mention that the roads were going to be at F in 5 years. I wonder what they're at now. Anyway, what I want to say is I've read your plan, and I want to support the Planning Commission's version of this. And I want to also say that I've seen the letter from April Vargas to you, and I agree with most of the points that she made in that, the November 29th letter, and also the Mid-Coast Community Council's letter. I think that takes into account the residents' problems with commuting, the problems with flooding that we have here, problems with highway safety, and finally, I just want to say that well, 2 things. The Caltrans right-of-way, I think you should honor the citizens' request to negotiate that as early as possible. There's no point in waiting. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Wilson, followed by Gail Yoshimina.
Hi, I'm Karen Wilson. I'm a resident of the Mid-Coast for 17 years. From my blue-collar job, I trekked through 2 job sites in these hills to get here. But speaking as a member of the Mid-Coast Community Council and the current chair, I would like to apologize for the lateness of getting you this letter. We only had 3 weeks to prepare it with a major holiday in the way, so hopefully you received the 12-page letter that I hope you can review and incorporate into your future planning. We do represent 11,000 residents here, and as you've heard many times, many can't be here during the middle of the day. We feel that the recommendations put forth in the staff report by your board subcommittee deserve to be fully addressed. In summary, the Mid-Coast Community Council still supports the recommendations of your Planning Commission with a few minor exceptions and urges that the board adopt those recommendations. These were arrived at after 5 years of fully inclusionary public process. We believe that best represents the views, beliefs, and needs of our community and are the best plans for the progress and growth of the unincorporated Mid-Coast. We believe that many of the recommendations from the board subcommittee within the staff report may run contrary to the principles of the Coastal Act and may be at odds even with the principles adopted earlier by your board. Our council and many members of the community are very disappointed in the fragmentation and lack of comprehensive and cohesive planning analysis that seems to be developing in the hearings. We are still concerned that your board is not giving any level of regard to the thought process and reasoning behind the Planning Commission's recommendations, and that the hearings are not giving enough background information, discussion, and history to be working from. In summary, the MCC recommendations is for your board to expeditiously approve the LCP update as developed by the Planning Commission. Good planning practices and adherence to the requirements for the development will not only maintain our long-term sustainability, but will substantially cut down on the number of appeals and save San Mateo County the endless hours and expense of dealing with contradicting policies and the appeal process. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Gail Yoshimina, followed by Bevan Yoshimina.
Greetings, board, and thank you for coming to hear us. I'm Gail Yoshimine, and I'm here to speak on behalf of the Big Wave Project, the Live Work community that was referred to. And just hearing some of the feedback, it sounds like the way is being paved for this project, and thank you for those decisions. I'm a mother of a teenager who has neurological impairments, and also a Special Olympics team manager and an administrative assistant for a homeschool group, which they came to hear public process, which might affect their future. And I also teach a small Sunday school class of young adults and high school students who have learning disabilities. So I know I represent the opinions of parents and families of people who have members who have disabilities. And one of the greatest fears that we have is for the future of our children, as it takes so much energy, as you can see, just being involved in all these organizations and groups to make a stable community that will support our kids' maturity and keep them out of trouble. And so to think about where they're going to be as adults is a big thing. When we hit the pits and valleys of life, we rely on, well, I rely on God, and I rely on the community of friends and teachers, administration, coaches, mentors, counselors, doctors, and those are all in the community. And so it gives us great hope to know that there's a hope that our kids won't have to be shuttled away from this community that we've so long tried to build. The Big Wave may be a dream come true where our kids can have a place to work and have meaningful work and have a home. So I urge you to make those decisions, to continue to make those decisions to make a way for Big Wave. Thank you.
Thank you. Bevan Yoshimina, followed by Joel Coletti.
Well, good afternoon, Board of Supervisors. My name is Devin Yoshimine. I'm a student at Half Moon Bay High and attend a homeschool group, and I'm a Special Olympics athlete. Those who don't know why I'm here to say my opinion about the project called Big Wave. Big Wave is a project where we are planning to build a community on a plot of land in El Granado for people with minor and serious handicaps. I'm one of those people speaking. The reason I want Big Web to become legalized is because I want this community built for those who could not take care of themselves or people who could but still have a handicap. If this project is not legalized, people with handicaps, when they grow up, life will be hard for us. They would have to be transported over the hill, and they would have to be away from our families and friends. Most of my friends can't drive, so I want this to be built. I'm speaking for most of my friends who have a hard time speaking or can't speak at all. I'm also speaking for those who could speak. I hope my opinion counts with you because I want this project to succeed in our future. And the reason I don't want to leave is because I really love the coast and I want to remain on the coast for most of my lifetime. Thank you.
Joel Coletti will be followed by Mary Lou Williams.
Thank you, President and Board of Supervisors. I speak here today as a resident of the community of Montara. After living in a big city, Manhattan, for most of my life, growing up there, I happened to come here as on a visit to Pacifica in 1980, and I never went back since. After leaving a prestigious Wall Street career, I found that I was able to make a great living in the city of San Francisco as well as the county of San Mateo. And one of the things that keeps me living here in the county in San Mateo is the uniqueness of our coastside community. And I would love to see that uniqueness remain that way and not become an urban jungle. Although I do have to suffer the traffic and going over the hill and sometimes passing through Pacifica, I'm willing to do that to live in such a unique and special place. However, that's becoming increasingly more difficult and more, I just don't really like the traffic that we have here on the coast, and it's getting worse. And I think by limiting the growth to 1% and giving working with Caltrans to give us that space to recreate and keeping the uniqueness of the community would benefit the county as a whole, as well as the citizens within the community. And I say that from an economical point of view, that if the county was to let this area build out at a greater than 1% growth, I think that it would move a lot of the people out of the community into other outlying areas, maybe like Pescadero or wherever, and maybe decrease the tax basis on the existing homes that are here. So I support low growth, and thank you for listening to us today.
Thank you. Mary Lou Williams to be followed by Sally Lehrman.
Honorable Supervisors, thank you so much for coming over here. I am also on the board of CPALS, which actually stands for Coastside Special, even I can't say it anymore. It's Coastside Special Parents Action League for special needs children and adults. And we are behind Big Wave, which is a separate entity. And just to make it clear, Jeff is not a developer, he is a contractor. And I think that's significant, because I can't see that he's going to be running around building projects like this all over the coast. This is very specific to our needs and our kids. Devin just put a face on who the developmentally disabled and disabled kids are in this community. There's 100 families. This is a small population over here. We don't even have all the families together that have kids with problems like this. My kid has cerebral palsy. He's in an electric wheelchair. He's visually impaired. And yet, despite his visual impairment, I can let him drive around the block where I live in Miramar because the neighbors all look out for him and they all care about it and they all know that, you know, this kid could get in trouble, so they watch out for him. The other thing is that I think you sort of discount this population because you assume that they're going to be taken care of by some federal or state entity. which is not true. There are no good solutions when I die about where my kid's going to live. This is the best and most hopeful project I've ever seen, and it's come at the right time. My kid needs full assistance in everything. But the kid's home, the lights are on, he knows what's going on. And to move him from this community would be a tragedy. Thank you.
Thank you. Sally Lehrman, to be followed by Leonard Warren.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. I'm Sally Lehrman. I live on Todd Street in Montero, and I know just what he's talking about. I found the subcommittee's proposals very surprising. The new proposals, whether intended or not, promote growth and weaken the county's ability to manage. We no longer live in an era of manifest destiny. The empty lands of the West never existed, and they still don't. Home prices are not going to continue to rise, and most experts predict a bust in the industries and government entities that rely on housing expansion to sustain infrastructure. We need to think in terms of sustainable, livable community, and that's what you've been hearing, I think, over and over. Visionaries elsewhere in California are doing this. Consider Napa Valley, in some ways comparable to us. We both have a beautiful landscape that attracts visitors and an agricultural-based industry. I'm struck by their focus on management of existing natural assets instead of growth. They have taken concrete steps to preserve agricultural land and natural environment from development. They encourage sustainable farming and add vitality to neglected natural areas. They are raising the land stewardship bar both to support responsible use and to allow the features of water, drainage, transportation, and clean air that support the community. Instead of thinking of affordable housing as the exception, Napa is making it central to planning. This is the lifeblood of our community, and we need to encourage modest-sized housing on standard lots instead of thinking of it as second units and add-ons. Instead of building more roads and more houses to draw more people in, we must create a region where residents can work, shop, buy locally grown foods, and educate their children right here sustainably. I urge you to follow the Mid-Coast Council's well-considered recommendations, not the subcommittee's new plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me just, before Mr. Warren speaks, let me advise the audience that we have about an hour left, and we are not quite halfway through the speaker slips, which means that not everyone's going to get finished today. If I call your name and you would prefer or be willing to speak next Tuesday morning in Redwood City and defer so that others can speak who might not be able to make it there, that would be appreciated so that we can try to accommodate more folks at this time. So, Leonard, I don't know what category you fall into.
I would like to speak now, although I will probably attempt to be there in time to listen to the other speakers.
Okay. Leonard will be followed by Kerry Burke.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, honorable members of the board. I'm the Vice President of the Granada Sanitary District Board, but I want to stress that I'm speaking as an individual today. The purpose of an LCP update is to look at how well the LCP has worked, factor in recent experience, factor in changed circumstances, and fine-tune the LCP. It's not, an LCP update is not intended to be a developer's wish list, which is what some of us feel is the direction that this is being taken now. The primary problem facing the coast side is that there are too many people living here, and all of the other problems that we have flow from that. You've heard about flooding. Flooding problems are basically because there are too many houses being built on too small properties given the environmental constraints. The current LCP gives a build-out population estimate. With the county saying that we're at 50% build-out, the final build-out under the current situation and with these proposals, we will be at 50% over the original estimated build-out. The land use needs to be revised to bring down the build-out population, not look for ways to increase it. Regarding the growth rate, at one of the Planning Commission hearings that was held at the El Granada School, one of your planning commissioners stated, We're heading towards a train wreck, and I see no reason to speed toward it. So we need to have a low growth rate while we try and deal with the problems caused by growth. The current proposal ignores the good planning commission work, it ignores the coastal commission staff recommendations, it ignores your advisory council, the elected Mid-Coast Community Council. Regarding house sizes, affordable housing, larger does not mean affordable. I will submit in writing in time for your Tuesday meeting a more detailed and expanded comments.
Thank you. Carrie Burke to be followed by Ann Carey.
Good afternoon, President Gordon, members of the board. It was a treat to have you over here today, and I was able to walk to the meeting, so that's one less car on the road today. I'm here to support the subcommittee's work as it pertains to issue number 9 and the Silvestri parcel. My client owns a half-acre parcel that has street frontage on both sides, development on 3 sides, the CCWD, water connection, and pays a sewer assessment. So retention of the ability to develop a single-story, single-family home is what she wishes, and we appreciate your work. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ann Carey to be followed by Bobby Hutcherson.
Good afternoon, President Gordon and honorable supervisors. My name is Ann Carey. I've attended almost all of the LCP update meetings since the beginning of the workshops in 2002. I've also been attending all of the Half Moon Bay update meetings. When analyzing the key issues, care must be taken to analyze all of the details. For example, there are those that are in favor of a 1% growth rate for the Mid-Coast, 40 permits per year, because of a perception that Half Moon Bay has a 1% growth rate. Yet if the details are analyzed, Half Moon Bay has a 1.5% growth rate, which equates to 70+ permits per year, which is comparable to the subcommittee proposal of 75 permits per year. The county has a finite amount of funds. If the growth rate is set excessively low, the cost of implementation will be excessively great, and the county will forego the opportunities to use funds for other means of coastal protection, such as the purchase of Marata surf. Therefore, the county must select an optimal growth rate, the greatest amount of growth control, at the least amount of cost. Also, when analyzing the key issues, care must be taken to not be myopic by focusing only on a key issue. The key issue must be analyzed in relationship to the entire LCP update. For example, some fear that the potential to expand Highway 1 up to 4 lanes could induce growth. Yet in the LCP update, there are numerous growth management strategies and demand reduction strategies for the roadways, which ensure that the potential to expand Highway 1 will not induce growth, but rather will provide an acceptable level of service and provide better access to the coast. I'm not in agreement with all of the subcommittee recommendations, but I believe the subcommittee recommendations in total not only carry out the coastal resource and public access protection policies of the Coastal Act, but also create a balance among the social, economic, and environmental needs of the Big Coast, and that is what will be best. Thank you.
Thank you. Bobby Hutcherson, followed by Chuck Kozak.
Good afternoon. My name is Bobby Hutcherson, and I've been a Crowside resident in Montana since 1972. I've seen an awful lot of droughts come along while I've been living here. I've seen a lot of development happen, and I would just like to say that I really feel that with the water situation that we have in Montana, the development needs to stop. We need to work on what we have there in the town. It's a special town. It's a special place. It's a place where people like to go for walks and ride their horses and ride their bikes. And these places that are in Montana need to stay there so that people can enjoy the town. And this is why the people come there, so that they can enjoy it. So please think about what I'm saying. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chuck Kozak to be followed by Don Bacon.
Good afternoon, member of the board. Welcome to the coast. I can be fairly brief. 2 minutes is not enough time to address anything in detail. So I would like to say that I do support the positions of the Mid-Coast Community Council and the Planning Commission recommendations and the recommendations that came from the Committee for Green Foothills. and the letters have all the details that you need. I feel that the Planning Commission proposal was best reflective of the comprehensive vision for the coastal areas of California as set forth in the findings, intent, and purpose of the Coastal Act. As the LCP is a local expression of the Coastal Act, we have always held that these should be the guiding principles for this process. When I look at the recommendations that are moving forth, I worry that this is moving from a process that was very inclusionary of community involvement to one that's becoming very exclusive, because now we're looking at expanded build-out with more houses, more development, potential for loss of neighborhood commercial areas, loss of marine-dependent capabilities. We're looking at bigger roads, more traffic, a lack of coordinated growth and planning with Half Moon Bay, potential loss of open space, loss of rural densities, larger houses on smaller lots, a lot more things. Specifically, we're looking at expansion that seems to have no analysis or consideration of coastal resource enhancement or protection. Most importantly, we're looking at the probable loss of the low-end market rate housing, and that's a concern of mine. As stated in the earlier letters that have been received from the council and from the community, we believe the package that was compiled by the Planning Commission is the best expression of the individual rights, the community rights, and the property rights of the coastal residents. The rights to retain the value and character of our communities through reasonable development controls, preservation of open space, environmental sensitivity, and respect for precious coastal resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Don Bacon, folled by Michon Coleman.
Supervisor, I can defer to next week.
Michon Coleman, to be followed by Barbara LeVay.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. I'll be brief. Sam Carr applauds and fully supports the county's commitment to affordable housing. We agree that the key LCP policies articulated in the current draft will facilitate affordable housing in the Mid-Coast. However, of particular concern is the staff recommendation to revise policy 3.21 to require that all new second dwelling units may only be established as affordable units subject to income and rent limits. We firmly believe that such restraint upon the use of second units constitutes an unreasonable limitation and infringement upon private property rights. In our estimation, such a constraint is not legally defensible. The Costa-Hawkins Act, codified in the California Civil Code, states in relevant part that all newly constructed units and all single-family homes are exempt from rent control. Further, pursuant to Government Code Section 6582, every local agency shall grant a variance or special use permit for the creation of a second unit. This law treats second units as single-family units, which, as noted previously, are exempt from rent control under the Costa-Hawkins Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara LeVay, followed by Chris Draper.
Good afternoon. My name is Barbara LeVay. I live in Montera, and I'm speaking on behalf of the San Mateo Association of Realtors. And SAMCAR is pleased to see that staff's recommendation to allow for voluntary lot mergers in lieu of mandatory mergers. SAMCAR strongly supports the use of incentives for voluntary lot mergers. While we agree that a phased approach to these mergers is both equitable and effective, we urge the board to consider extending the proposed 18-month period to request a voluntary merger and receive an incentive voucher to a period of at least 3 years. In our view, 18 months is too short a frame of time for owners to assess their options and make a determination. In regards to the non-conforming parcel development controls, we ask that the board retain the existing zoning controls with no change. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris Draper, to be followed by Barry Parr.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. My name is Chris Draper. I'm speaking on behalf of the San Mateo County Association of Realtors, and I'll be exceedingly brief. We wanted to mention to you one of your key issues, 7A, dealing with residential uses in the C1 neighborhood commercial district. Currently, the Planning Commission and staff have recommended a reduction in the building height from 36 to 28 feet. SAMCAR would encourage the board to consider retaining the current height limits for this sort of a mixed-use development. Alternatively, we would suggest that height limits not be lower than 32 feet, which would be consistent with many other residential uses in the county. Thank you.
Thank you. Barry Parr, to be followed by Dirk Sell.
Welcome to the Coast Side. I publish CoastSider, which is a web news site for the coast. And I've got some letters from some readers that asked me to bring these here for the board. I started CoastSider because I really love this place. Even if it didn't have a beach, it'd be unique. And the subcommittee's recommendations really make me think that it's going to be just like any other place. I'm amazed at the depth and complexity of these issues. They're really pretty overwhelming. And we're lucky to have an elected community council, professional planning commission, and coastal commission staff to do the hard work to represent us and to get these hard problems right. I urge the supervisors to adopt the LCP update as recommended by its planning commission. Thank you.
Thank you. Dirk Sell, followed by Joyce Fancher-Halpin.
Good afternoon, supervisors. My name is Dirk Sell. I'm a father, a husband, a homeowner, and a small business owner in Montera. I was at a meeting on April 26th earlier this year, and I heard about 40 people speak up about the Caltrans easement, and I heard no one have anything bad to say, and yet that you propose to delay making any decisions for the next 6 years or until the tunnel is built. I also heard a few people discuss, mention safety along the highways. There was one gentleman at the meeting who brought up that his son had been killed, and he was there to encourage you guys to make it safer on the coast, but instead we're getting a proposal to increase the number of lanes on the highway there to 4 lanes. And to be honest, that's the only area of the coast that doesn't have traffic, so I'm wondering why we'd even need 4 lanes right there. And it's already hard enough to cross the highway there, so I just encourage you to listen to what we're saying and to get it done on the Caltrans easement. Thanks.
Thank you. Joyce Fancher-Halpin. Till next week. Thank you. Gail Erickson. Okay. Barb Moss. Followed by Kathleen Chittenden. I hope I get your name right. I apologize.
Good afternoon, supervisors. I'm Barbara Moss from El Granada, and I love it here. I'm very concerned about our coast side in the proposed LCP update. I concur with Leonard Warren that this LCP update isn't doing what an LCP update should be. It's to take a look back at the amount of development that's taken place since the LCP was adopted, which is 1986 in our case, and then take a careful look at the coastal resources that we need to create better protections for. And best way to follow a legitimate LCP update would be to do a carrying capacity analysis. Had the county done that, the results would clearly show that we are nearly built out now. The current LCP update used outdated overestimates from the 1980s that don't even include the hundreds, if not thousands, of antiquated 25-foot substandard lots in the mid-coast. That you will note that there are at least 800 of these lots within the Granada Sanitary District sewer service area. County planning staff incorrectly based all of their overloaded assumptions for how many additional houses, people, cars, and out-of-scale infrastructure expansions, additional water supply estimates, out-of-scale park rec, and school facilities that they would like, that the county would like or assumes that they can shove into the mid-coast. On these inappropriate, incorrect, outdated LCP update numbers. I have a little bit to go. Consequently, the LCP update, as it is now, is a total fraud. We would like to see this taken back, the carrying capacity, take the schemes that exploit all the substandard lots out. And this includes LCP Amendment 3-00 Part A, that has a determination to consider 3,500 square foot lots or above, but yet under the zoning lot minimum, required 5,000 square feet for El Granada, Princeton, Moss Beach, and Montera.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Laws. We'd be happy to take any further comments in writing.
One more, that huge FAR percent lot coverages would induce exploitation of these multitude of substandard lots. And
Okay, thank you very much. If you have further comments, please provide them in writing.
I have this letter for
Thank
you. Please make this and the attached two-page additional concerns a part of the official public record for this LCP.
We will do that.
Thank
Could
you.
give them to the clerk, please. Thank you. Kathleen Crittenden, followed by Kevin Lansing.
Good afternoon. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Kathleen Chittenden. It's close. Good enough. Thank you. I've been on the coast side. We own property and live in Moss Beach. Soon to be altogether 7 years. And what brought us to the coast side was the natural beauty and the quiet area. So close to the city, but just an easy, usable road system, so we thought. But it seems to be increasingly getting more like a city and becoming like Santa Cruz or Pacifica, especially if they have four-lane traffic. And I've seen many accidents, and we live near the fire station in Montara, and we are used to the sirens going out constantly, mostly to go to Devil's Slide area. But in the wintertime, these roads are terribly dangerous, and I think increasing too much growth in the area would only make things much worse. And where we live in Montara, at Moss Beach and Montara, the back roads are a sanctuary really for us who would like to walk and to look at the natural beauty and use the footpaths and trails with our horses, with our dogs and children and families on a Sunday. And although I would, I'm sure my neighbours would agree to certain growth in areas that are most needed, mainly for those of us who are already there, rather than creating the floodgates open, if you like, for more people to come to the coast side. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Kevin Lansing, followed by John Lynch.
Good afternoon, Board. Kevin Lansing. I'm a member of the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission, but my comments reflect my views as an individual resident. I want to thank the Board for holding this hearing on the coast side today. I think it's quite symbolic that the hearing is actually taking place within the city limits of Half Moon Bay. I think we all can agree that the decisions about growth, infrastructure, and housing that the Board is now addressing as part of the Mid-Coast LCP update will have a profound effect on neighboring communities, including Half Moon Bay. The Board's subcommittee's vision for build-out implies a near doubling of the number of residential housing units on the Mid-Coast relative to current levels. And this build-out scenario would severely overburden the capacity of local roads and schools, which have been commonly financed with other neighboring communities, most notably with Half Moon Bay. Nowhere in the Board Subcommittee's recommendations is there a discussion or analysis of how the Cabrillo Unified School District will be capable of handling the build-out scenario. And it's clear that the Board Subcommittee is concerned with the issue of property rights, but there's no doubt that the property values of existing residents will be negatively impacted if overdevelopment is allowed to degrade the quality of the local school system. The Board Subcommittee's recommendation to implement a 2% residential growth rate would concentrate growth in the Mid-Coast relative to that taking place in Half Moon Bay. This is particularly true given that the board is recommending an exemption from the annual growth rate limit for affordable housing, second units, and caretakers' quarters. So the true growth rate in the Mid-Coast will actually be higher than 2%, perhaps substantially so. Again, this policy will cause limited infrastructure capacity to be absorbed in the Mid-Coast, even though this infrastructure is commonly financed with neighboring communities such as Half Moon Bay. I would urge the board to adopt a 1% growth rate limitation patterned after Half Moon Bay's Measure D ordinance, which was passed by a wide margin in 1999, and drop the exclusions for various categories of housing as recommended by Coastal Commission staff. With regard to the build-out numbers themselves, the Mid-Coast LCP should recognize the cap that has been placed on the number of CCWD water connections as a conditional approval of the coastal development permit, I'm almost done, for the El Granada pipeline project in December 2003. Any build-out in excess of the cap number of Phase 1 water connections would have to be served by wells, and this is clearly an unsatisfactory policy given the evidence we have of the increasing number of failed wells on the Mid-Coast. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. John Lintz, to be followed by Sophia Frere.
John Lynch, a 32-year resident of Half Moon Bay. Honorable Richard Gordon and other honorable members of the Board of Supervisors. Thank you for coming over the hill, but I don't infer that you people are over the hill. Okay. I gave you each a report of my own thoughts about the LCP update, but I want to give you a hard copy of the report that the League for Coastal Protection submitted you electronically, and I'll also do it afterwards. But my third point, I received an interesting email today that succinctly reflects my view about this whole LCP update. And let me read what this person said to me. One, we do have an LCP. It is not perfect for sure. But what truly gets me is the monumental waste of time and thought that the Planning Commission, the staff, and the public has put into this effort, and for such minuscule results. Thank you.
Thank you. Sophia Frere, followed by Stephen Frere. May not be getting that name right, I apologize.
Very close, Freer. First, I'd like to thank the Board of Supervisors for scheduling this coastside meeting. I'm a member of the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission, speaking as a resident of Half Moon Bay. Those of us who live in Half Moon Bay and those who live on the Mid-Coast may be under different jurisdictions, but we share the same roads and schools, and we have similar issues with the availability of water and the necessity to preserve our beautiful, fragile ecosystem. The great majority of Half Moon Bay voters decided the 1% annual residential growth was all our city could afford within the constraints of infrastructure and our limited financial resources to provide essential public services. The issues of water, schools, traffic, environmental protection, and maintaining our unique character were the driving force behind our 1% growth ordinance. Those issues are still with us, and allowing 2% growth in the Mid-Coast would, in essence, disenfranchise the voters of Half Moon Bay. The Mid-Coast Community Council, which represents the voters of the Mid-Coast, wants 1% growth. The County Planning Commission recommends 1% growth, and the cities of Pacifica and Half Moon Bay are pursuing 1% growth. It is simply unfair to impose faster growth on our coast. The Half Moon Bay 1% growth initiative does not exclude affordable housing for a very simple reason. Though nobody questions the need for affordable homes, the residents in below market units have the same need for public services as any others. They drive cars, their children attend public schools, they do laundry and flush toilets. They need to be counted. They have recreational needs and they require fire and water protection. I believe that affordable units need to be counted and should not take away priority water connections, interfere with current design review standards, or cause undue increase in impervious surfaces. When I look at the Board of Supervisors' vision for the Mid-Coast as implemented according to the subcommittee's recommendation, I see a coastal community with recurring water shortages, overcrowded schools, dangerous loss of wetlands and increased periodic flooding, loss of recreational opportunities with special reference to Devil's Slide, and unbearable traffic. This cannot be what the citizens of San Mateo County or the state of California want. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephen will be followed by Jeffrey Tong, and again, I remind anyone who would be willing to defer until next Tuesday, that would be appreciated.
Good afternoon, President Gordon, Commissioners. I just want to echo what my wife said. I support 1% growth here. It's the infrastructure will not reliably support more. I urge you to accept the recommendations of your own planning commission, the recommendations of the Mid-Coast Council, City Council, and to align yourselves with the voters of Half Moon Bay and Pacifica who support 1% growth. And furthermore, I urge you that the bypass is a great place for open space and recreation. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Tong, followed by Ron Miller.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeffrey Tong. I represent the San Mateo County Board of Realtors. I would like to address two issues. Issue number one, the subcommittee recommended increasing commercial and employment opportunities. SEMCAR suggests that the board would consider including agricultural service retail such as fruit and vegetable stands and other similar products. Issue number two, or issue number 19, impervious surface limits. The Planning Commission recommends limiting the ground level impervious surface to 10% of parcel size, not to exceed 1,170 square feet. SEMCAR asked the board to reconsider its tentative approval of this provision to increase or allow increases greater than the current 10% limit. For example, if one has a 5,000 square foot parcel, 10% is 500. So with an average size two-car garage and walkway, much of that 10% it doesn't even cover patios and other small surfaces. So this provision limits unfairly the smallest property owners. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ron Miller, followed by Lynette Krithos.
My name is Ron Miller and I live in Montera. And my husband's family has been flower farmers on the coast since the 20s. And I support the Farm Bureau's position, Jack Olson's proposal on not changing usage at this time. I also urge that the height limits remain at 36 feet. I don't think that people really understand the needs of building in a farming community, and I don't think we really understand what's been happening in terms of land use for our farming community, and oftentimes a greater height limit is needed for storing farm equipment or somehow merging residential use and the use of farming. And I'd like to ask too that access to zoning requirements for agricultural properties be made more available and more affordable as they are for residential property owners. It's very difficult to access and to figure out what you can even do on your property because the cost is so high. Our family lost a sizable amount of property to the Caltrans bypass as part of eminent domain. And I believe that the original owners are not going to have any way to recapture their property. And if that's a fact, I would certainly hope that this land be used by the community for community use, since that's why it was taken away from us in the first place. I also support the 1% growth rate that was established by the Commission. Our personal property borders Date Street between Edison and Franklin. 7 very huge projects went up there in the past 4 years. And I don't think anybody really understands the effect that these projects are going to have on flooding, on infrastructure, on contamination of creeks. I can't even tell you what it's like to see 7 huge 4,000 square foot houses go up right in your backyard. And I would also urge everyone please not to make Highway 1 4 lanes. I don't even know how that got in there.
Okay,
thank you. Anyway, thank you.
Lynette Kurthos, followed by Gloria Clark.
I'm Lynette Kurthoys, and I am a 9-year resident of El Granada. And I plan to submit a letter, though hearing many of the things I've heard today, I think I might make some revisions, so I'll submit it at a later date. But I would like to encourage the board to not increase, perhaps even reduce if possible, the build-out projections for the mid-coast. The idea of doubling the amount of residential development would really change the character of the community that we all love. And I also do support the 1% growth rate and think that all development should be included in that 1%. On the issue of substandard lots, I think that Half Moon Bay has got a good proportionality rule, and I think that the Planning Commission recommended proportionality rule should go into effect in the county as well. And I think we should be discouraging rather than encouraging development on these lots, and so giving them priority sewer and water I think is a bad idea. And I think a mandatory lot merger program should be pursued rather than the voluntary program, because I do think that it would give folks time and encourage the checkerboarding that's been mentioned so far. I also like the idea of rezoning residential areas to non-residential mixed use as being encouraged by the Coastal Commission, and I think that supports employment generating development and will help us with our job housing imbalance. On the open space issues, I support the recommendations of the Coastal Commission staff to maintain the coastal open space zoning for the areas where it is now, and to quickly as possible convert the Caltrans bypass to that zoning. And I also am a little bit dismayed by the idea of seeing Highway 1 turned into a 4-lane road, because I think that would dramatically change the character of our community. And last but not least, I support the letters from both the Coastal Commission staff and the Granada Sanitary District and the items that address the inadequate wastewater collection and transmission that we have in our community. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Gloria Clark, followed by Michael Martin.
Hi, I'm Gloria Clark, and I'm glad to have you over here today. I've been a resident and working on the coast for 28 years. I am a member of SAMCAR and also the Legislative Committee of SAMCAR, and I want to speak about the residential use in the Coastside Open Space Conservation District. The Planning Commission recommends that the county prohibit single-family residences in the Coastside Open Space Conservation District, or the Burnham Strip. While SAMCAR understands a concern for preservation of visual openness, we strongly support the staff recommendation that no zoning changes be made in this area, thus continuing to permit single-family residences in the Coastside Open Space District. I want to say that for a single-family residence to be built in that area, it must only cover 10% of the lot and be a 16-foot height limit. And I believe that that already provides for the lightest use of that zoning property. So I think that probably single-family residences would be lower use than any other use you might have there as far as traffic and people. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Michael Martin, to be followed by Judy Taylor.
Hi, I'm Michael Martin. When I came here in 1984, there was approval for Highway 1 to be 4 lanes from one end of town to the other. Here we are, 2005, and now we're just saying maybe we shouldn't do it, except for we have a real traffic problem. I'm not quite sure how reducing the roads is going to help the traffic problem. I'm a real estate broker, and I realize that people that pay their property taxes have rights that are associated with that. I believe it's the under all is the land, I think, is the basic property right that separates us as Americans from everybody else. There's a lot of undeveloped lots out there that are owned by people that are paying their taxes, that want to enjoy the same right of use and benefit from their property that everybody in the audience enjoys. And sooner or later, they're going to want to build on their property. And we've had an awful lot of litigation in Half Moon Bay because there's been attempts to either slow or stop people from building on their property. And I just want to tell you, for one, I really appreciate all the work you've done. I've been coming to these meetings, and I know it's difficult to reduce the growth rate, and you've done a good job of that. I think people have a right to build, but I also think that reducing the growth rate's good, and I think you've picked a good number in the 2%. I own a couple of substandard lots, and if you want to merge them, I would prefer that you don't steal them from me by taking away the opportunity, but I would merge them if I could have an incentive to build a low-income housing. We need low-income housing. You've designated 3 low-income housing sites, one of which is in Moss Beach. I know they've been trying to build that Moss Beach Highlands project for 15 years, and now you're going to go and try and create more incentives. If you're going to create incentives to build low-income property, whether it be from substandard lots or designated sites, please look at what's gone on before us. No low-income housing has been built. Please keep that in mind when you do your thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Judy Taylor, to be followed by Peggy Roos.
Good afternoon again. Thanks for making the trip over the hill. I have several specific comments that I'll address in writing. For the most part, I support the subcommittee's recommendations, but philosophically, I think that we need to go back to a basic point, and that is that we can address traffic and protect property rights. We can address the economic needs of the community and the needs of the environment if we think in and both rather than either or. And most of the speakers that have been coming up here today, it's either the environment or the economy. It's either the traffic or property rights. And there is a way that we can do both, and we need to be thinking more about that, and I appreciate the fact that this document seems to be addressing that in some levels. As a 31-year resident, I can tell you when I first moved here, I thought, yes, let's slow growth until we address these problems. It's been 31 years, and the problems are not being addressed. And it's not the people that haven't built here yet that are causing the problems. It's the people that are living here now that have to drive their car everywhere. It's the people here who are here now who are not paying attention to how they use water. It's the fact that this community doesn't have a storm drain system. Those are the reasons why we have the problems that we have today. It's not because of new housing, and it's not going to be corrected by preventing more housing. We have geographical limits on where we can grow, we have annual limits on how fast we can get there, and we have ultimate limits on what they're going to be. It's time now to shift our focus to addressing these problems because they're not being addressed. Thank you much.
Thank you. Peggy Roos, to be followed by Julian McCurry.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming here. Sorry, I've got a little bit of a cold. My name is Peggy Roos. I live in Moss Beach, and I'm a small business owner, and I'm a white-collar worker, and I've come here, which means that I'm not working in my business right now. But I really appreciate that you're holding this today. I also recently ran for a board position in my local water and sanitary district, and appreciate the support of the community for that. Holding back in infrastructure, just put my glasses on here, sorry. Holding back infrastructure improvements in the name of no growth, allowing it to deteriorate and patching up rather than permanently fixing problems is wrong and unsafe. I think the Napa analogy that was just given is very interesting because it's my understanding that they have visionary and some good ideas up there around their water system. I'd like to support the subcommittee recommendation, which is, I believe, 3C3, which is supporting CCWD and MSWD and continuing their efforts to secure water supply sources and applying for facility expansion to serve the mid-coast at build-out. However, I'd like to add some important suggestions to up that. I'd like to suggest that we streamline the county processes and approvals to provide more water into our troubled district immediately, such as wet water well permits. The airport wells is a ticking time bomb, and the MWSD and the county are business partners in this situation. I recommend that MWSD and the county put their heads together and collectively come up with a viable plan that will allow our district to move off of those wells safely and quickly and to replace them with new clean water sources. I also recommend that to allow failed private wells to receive priority hookups. I also would like to suggest that the county consider, I'll be done in a second, the county consider stepping in in some way if MWSD fails to aggressively pursue new clean water supply sources and produce it, and end the water moratorium hookup sooner, not later. Thank you.
Thank you. Julian McCurra, to be followed by Al McMorris.
Hello, my name is Julian McCurra. I've been a resident of the Coast Side since 1972. I've had businesses here since 1973. I am currently the chair of the Princeton Citizens Advisory Committee, who has worked with the county since before the onset of this process, going back to 1985 and the AO issues at that time. First and foremost, the PCAC would like to thank the supervisors, Planning Commission, and the subcommittee for their work and their support of the Princeton community's efforts to vitalize our area economically. Specifically, the opportunity for increased live-work housing in the form of caretaker units and mixed use, and the additional all-important permitted uses proposed for the W Waterfront District will do a great deal to vitalize business development in that area. That said, the airport overlay zone, which we have been working with county on since 1998, has still not been reestablished viably for our purposes. Then and now, current FAA and LUC protection zones would allow for everything that is being proposed by staff, subcommittee, and the PCAC. At this juncture, we would respectfully request that the current laws be adhered to and that the stifling effect of the delays to this never-ending airport master plan be stopped. The laws to allow this are in place and have been in place for the entire 8-year wait that our area has suffered. Please remember that this area comprises more than a third of the available property in the very central core of Princeton, and the map you saw earlier would attest to that. No one single thing could change business vitality in our area more than the rational removal of the additional overlay and the adherence to the current laws and statutes existing in the FAA and ALUC regulations. I would remind you that even with the proposed conditions of 1 person per 1,667 square feet of parcel area, you could put more people in the average plane flying over a block building on the 5,000 square foot minimum lot than you could put on the ground underneath it. At this point, we would respectfully request that this issue be brought to rest and that we follow the current laws that are in place now and have been for better than the last 8 years. Again, from the board and membership of the PCAC, our thanks for your time today and your continued efforts on our behalf.
Thank you. Al McMorris, followed by Deb Laguteras.
Honorable Supervisors, thank you for letting me speak. My name is Al McMorris. I live in Montera. I would like to hope that you have listened to all the great points that have been made by those supporting the Coastal Commission, and remember that so many of those supporting the 2% are really here to make a buck. Thank you.
Deb Laguteras, followed by Vince Williams.
I had several comments I wanted to make, but I'll keep this very brief. I think that having a 2% growth rate imposed represents placing an unfunded mandate on the city of Half Moon Bay and its residents, because we represent the urban infrastructure for the rest of the coast. Thank you.
Vince Williams, followed by Meryl Bobile.
Honorable Supervisors, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Vince Williams. I'm a resident of Moss Beach. The infrastructure of the coastside is taxed at current population levels. As an example, the roads cannot handle the capacity of the people that live here. This impacts the ability of other residents of San Mateo County to visit the coast and recreate. Most of the buildable lots and infrastructure have already been developed. Undeveloped 2,500 square foot lots subdivided 100 years ago during the real estate promotion associated with the Ocean Shore Railroad should not guarantee development rights in perpetuity. The remaining lots are problematic. As an example, look at the backside flooding in Montera. This is an example of poor county planning. It's unfair to further burden the residents of this community with paying for the cost of developing the infrastructure so some marginal lots can be developed. The cost of housing has risen in the metropolitan Bay Area to the point that the economics of building push the floor area ratios. Most Bay Area communities require that the floor area ratios be under 50% with no exceptions. Also, substandard lots are severely restricted in most communities. In this community, they seem to be pushing the limits on substandard lots. Developing low-cost housing on substandard lots in an area with long commutes and poor public transportation does not make sense. At the other end, extreme monster homes towering over existing cottages would not be tolerated in other Bay Area communities. This all shifts an unfair burden to the current residents of this community so few can make a buck. Additional houses put more cars on the road, more parked cars on the substandard 100-year-old streets. Who pays for the schools, the water, the sewers, the non-point source of pollution runoff treatment for these new homes? If the county is willing to assume the cost of these out of the increased property taxes they gather from these new homes, that's fine, but they haven't. They've dumped these issues on the residents of the Mid-Coast. One more paragraph. I'd like to see a strict 1% development cap with no special treatment for sub 5,000 square foot lots, keeping the current Caltrans right of way as greenbelt. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Merrill Bobile, to be followed by Cynthia Stern.
Good afternoon, President Gordon and members of the Board of Supervisors. I am Merrill Mobile, and I've lived in El Granada for just 30 years, since 1976. And I should let you know that as a retired teacher and counselor, I look at the document much as I might look at a term paper. And in terms of evaluating it, it looks a lot like a working draft. I haven't attended but one hearing, but I have also communicated with George Bergman, and I find that much hard work was done by many, many people. And just listening to the testimony today, that's evident. But I find that it's not complete yet, and I would hate to see you rush to adopting an LCP that I think is not complete. First of all, I'll try and be brief. The consultant that you hired to analyze the commercial and economic opportunities, I don't see the analysis that's based on the statistics and figures which reach these conclusions. Now, maybe it was done in another session, so if that's available, I'd appreciate seeing that. I have a lot of interest in talking about the W area, I think. One of the things that seems to be missing, I also am a sailor, is the lack of boat repair yard. And I don't see anything in the document that talks about a boat repair and maintenance yard. In fact, some of the subcommittee's recommendations seem to exclude that as a possibility. And going back just a minute longer, a second longer.
Second longer.
Back to 1976, when I first moved here, I did see Caltrans right-of-way that moved further east of Highway 1 in the COFC area that has been talked about considerably. And I'd appreciate knowing what the Transportation Authority is thinking on that. I don't see how you can make a decision until you have some of that data.
Thank you very much. Cynthia Stern, followed by Art Hoffmeyer.
Thank you for coming over the hill. I did email all of you a letter this morning, so I hope that's been received. Basically, and briefly, I just would like to support the 1% growth rate. And it seems to me that the Mid-Coast Community Council, which I used to be fairly active on, but haven't in recent years, has gone to an enormous amount of work to lay out and express a sense of something that's environmentally benign while allowing reasonable growth. The other thing I would say, I live in Montero, the other thing I would say is that the prospect of a 4-lane highway somehow resurrects the whole thing about the freeway instead of the tunnel, and it seems to me we're sort of going backward in that. And last but not least, I will point out that in Montero, I've begun noticing 25-mile-per-hour street signs, which tells me that there are parents or older adults or whomever who are concerned about the amount of traffic and they're trying to stop it. So I think further expansion of traffic highway and increasing the growth rate is ill-advised. Thanks.
Art Hoffmeyer, followed by Tom Valentine.
Thank you. Thank you for coming, Art Hoffmeyer, Montero. We have come into these rooms, we the folks whose lives have rooted in El Granada, Miramar, West Beach, and Montero, to participate in the public hearing process. We have over many months hammered out with our neighbors, many of whom rely on the business of construction and the selling of real estate, a vision of the future, our future. The agreements did not come easily. Candor, passion, disagreement, and devotion to the process were the ingredients. We mixed it up, wrangled, we got angry, we sweated, sometimes we even cursed. But we kept coming back, and lo and behold, we created a document together. It was our vision together. James Howard, counselor and expert on runaway urban development, who has written 3 books about the subject, including The Geography of Nowhere, says we are sleepwalking into the future, that America's land development policies that began in the 1950s are now bankrupt. They are, like a Ponzi scheme, unsustainable. Our limited resources are maxed out. The engine that has stoked the American dream, fossil fuel worldwide, has peaked and is in decline. We need a new vision to survive and flourish. Consular vision is, I must say, not unlike the vision embodied in our Horde 1 LCP update. Consular says that in the years ahead we will have to renovate existing towns and villages and produce our food close to home. The future will be about the design and reconstituting of places that are worth caring about and worth being in. We will have to create the lost infrastructure of local commerce. In our case on the Mid-Coast, we have the opportunity to, as Consular says, make the decisions that take the need of the community into account, because we, the folks who live here on the coast, are the caretakers of our institutions. We are the people who sit on the water board and the school board and the Mid-Coast Community Council. We are the people who man the shops, own the businesses, sponsor the cake sales, drive the roads, walk the trails, fish the waters, teach the kids, manage the parks, maintain the harbor, process the mail, grow the food, put out the fires, and purchase the balls and bats for our Little League teams. We are the ones, we who live here, the coastsiders, who met in these rooms for hundreds of hours, week in and week out, to forge a vision of tomorrow. And we are the ones here today who can tell our children, look them in the eye and say, tonight and in the future, we thought about you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Valentine deferred. That would lead me to Lenny Schultz, followed by Chris Vogel.
Good afternoon, Supervisors. Thank you for being here. I'm Lenny Schultz from El Granada. I'm an ex-sanitary district director. I'm asking you tonight to please honor the recommendation of the Planning Commission for prohibiting residential development in the few remaining COSC zoned properties. To change the zoning from COSC to RMCZ and EG would be inconsistent with both the LUP and the community plan, and would intensify its development by allowing a wall of monster houses along the front of Granada, the cherished Burnham Strip. It's part of our open space component. The land was wisely zoned COSC to protect it from intense development and for compliance with the Coastal Act policy. The proposed zoning change would not be consistent with Coastal Act policy and would certainly not protect the quality of the natural environment, which is part of your vision, which you say is in the revision of the LCP. I support all the recommendations in the letter dated 12/1/05 also from the Granada Sanitary District to the Board of Supervisors. The Coastal Commission does not support a zoning change and supports prohibiting residential development on COSC district property. We only have a tiny bit of open space left on the front of Granada, and that is one of the most beautiful features of our town. You can see that the streets are radially designed so that when you walk down each street, you can view the ocean. And RMCZ does not have a limit on size of houses. We would have a wall of houses across the front. Thank you very much.
Thank
Please
you.
adopt your Planning Commission's recommendations.
Okay, Chris Vogel, followed by Larry Kleinman. Chris Vogel. Okay, Larry Kleinman.
My name is Larry Kleinman, and we've lived in Montero for more than 16 years, so we appreciate the moderation of development to date. Still, there are burdens that we face that do not impact residents in other parts of San Mateo County. If you double the housing units, or triple, that will cause a doubling or tripling of the number of cars that we have on the coast. As it is now, we have no police support to enforce the current speed limit of 25 miles per hour. We organized an effort to petition the county for speed humps to slow drivers on Hart Street. We did this after repeatedly contacting the Highway Patrol to request support for enforcement of the 25 miles per hour speed limit. We were told that there was only one officer assigned to the coast from Pacifica to Pescadero. The Highway Patrol sent an officer who sat on our street for 1 hour on one afternoon without any radar. He left without issuing any tickets as far as we know, never to return. Although the speed humps do discourage many drivers from excessive speeds, there are still others who careen past our houses and occasionally drive onto our lawns. Since we have no sidewalks, children use the streets for bicycle riding and skateboarding. Parents push young children in strollers, and the streets are used for dog walking and as pedestrian walkways. Coastside communities are primarily communities of young families. Additional traffic on our roads will make current usage of our local streets even more dangerous. We noticed recently that there are speed humps in other parts of our town and that new stop signs have been added at several intersections. Local traffic, even in our small community, has become a serious safety issue. The roads are resurfaced once every so often, and for the following several years, holes are patched as necessary. So we live with roads that have holes, are crumbling, or are disintegrating along the shoulders. Additional traffic burdens will accelerate these problems. One last paragraph. Walking around Montero today, it appears that there is already construction on just about every vacant lot. We already have near gridlock on weekends. There is a limit to how much development a community can tolerate before its quality is destroyed. We see a very bleak future for our coastside communities if an additional 3,000 to 3,400 housing units are added. We appeal to you to protect the mid-coast. Thank you.
Thank you. Scott Boyd, followed by Bruce Perrucker.
Good afternoon, Honorable Board. I'm glad to be here. I'm grateful that I could get away from work in the middle of the workday and that you could join us here on the coast side. And as president of Montero Water and Sanitary District Board and the 5,000 people in my community 7 miles to the north, I'd like to invite you to join us up there for a meeting sometime. Montero Water and Sanitary District, which I serve as president. It's my honor to do that and to serve as chair of the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast. Montero Water and Sanitary serves over 5,000 residents. We produce water, we take care of trash disposal, recycling, and we clean wastewater for our residents. We sent you 2 letters on Friday. I hope you're in receipt of those. Montero Water and Sanitary District was the first to issue sewer permits after the plant upsizing and reopening in 1999. We were the first owners of the water system to drill new wells in years. We have invested heavily in infrastructure, and I carted up this heavy thing to show you. This is our current Public Works Plan Phase 1, which is currently going through review and permitting. That's our draft EIR. We have worked closely with many of the builders that you've heard from today. Our rule, not the exception, the rule is to issue permits for the infrastructure that they need to do the building that the planning laws allow for. Two specific issues I want to talk to you about quickly. Failed wells. We need to be able to get them onto the public water supply. We have asked, and I ask again on behalf of my board and my community, that you make the LCP amendment to allow failed wells, and we sent you language on this, failed wells to be served as a priority use to get them onto a public water supply. Once again, I invite the county in its water study to share the information and the wells that our district has. We have been aggressive about doing drilling and getting data, and I'm going to have to skip some of this water supply stuff. 30 years of moratorium. We are working very hard, and we need you to understand that despite our best efforts, we must plan on available resources that our local community can provide. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Scott. Bruce Carrucker? If I didn't butcher that name too bad, Bruce.
That's okay.
To be followed by Jerry Laster.
My name is Bruce Perucker. I live in Montero. I'm here today as a concerned citizen. I've lived in Montero for 27 years, and I care very much about what happens on the coast side. I support the views of Mid-Coast Community Council and urge you to follow their recommendations on policies concerning what goes on the coast side. Thank you.
Thank you. Jerry Laster, to be followed by Larry DeYoung.
I'm Jerry Laster. I'm a resident of El Granada. I'm so pleased that you still have the Burnham Strip on the board. It's obviously in all of your minds and everyone in the audience, and they are probably wondering where the devil it is. But anyone who looks at it will realize that it's the gateway to El Granada. It's a magnificent piece of property which only has a couple of buildings on it at the present time, and would be ideal for public open space. And as some of you know, I've been working for years with Burnham Strip Committee, Mid-Coast Parklands, and a more active park alternatives for Granada to find a method of acquiring that property for public use. We spent some time this past spring. I have a little button to show you for it, in which we were attempting to get signatures for the formation of a community services district by reorganization of the Granada Sanitary District. Hopefully that will move through now that we have new community services district legislation that will be effective the 1st of January. We think that of the alternatives which you have, the existing zoning is probably the one that will give us the greatest opportunity to acquire as much of that property as is appropriate and possible in the near future for public use. So that's my personal recommendation. I can't say that that's any of the committees that I've been associated with. Thank you.
Larry DeYoung, I have a slip here from Alan Olivo. Alan says you do not wish to speak. Is that correct?
Alan left, but no, he did not wish to.
Okay.
He just wanted to be on the mailing.
All right, then let me, we were going to stop at 5, but I have 2 speakers left, so we're going to take these last 2 speakers. First is Mr. DeYoung, followed by Derek Kulda.
I knew having the last word at a county meeting was too good to be true. I do have to say, though, all kidding aside, I think this is backwards here. You are our representatives, especially Supervisor Gordon, who represents our district. The views of the people in this district are well documented, well known. The views of the people in Half Moon Bay are well known. We should not be up here defending our quality of life in our community yet again. You should be making the case why you think it's a good idea to double the housing over what was offered. I think the burden is on you. It shouldn't be on us. That these 2%, the 1% rule was hashed out in good faith by people who cared. We still care. We do care about the owls. I'll tell you, there'll be a lot of people crying if we go out and don't hear owls at night. That's the way we love our community here. So you tell us why this is a good idea. I'm tired of being up here defending my community from people who are supposed to be representing us. Thank you.
that is end of the speaker slips for today. Let me just talk briefly about our process before we adjourn this meeting. We are going to keep this public hearing open and continue it until next Tuesday. The hearing is set for a time certain of 10:30 a.m. that will be in Redwood City at the Board of Supervisors chambers. Those of you who follow us know that when we set a time certain, it means that we don't start earlier than that, but depending upon the calendar, it could be later than that. The process will be that we will start next Tuesday with those who filled out speaker slips today and did not have a chance to speak, or actually deferred their opportunity to speak today. We will start with them. We will also allow anyone else who would happen to show up on that day who has not spoken today. So if you have made your comments today, there is not further opportunity to comment in this continued public hearing. Speakers on Tuesday will be those who deferred their comments today and anyone new who shows up. And I cannot tell you yet what, because we can't discuss this till we get there next Tuesday, whether at that point on Tuesday the board will actually begin to take some action on these items or we'll defer the items. I don't know where we're going with that at this point, but we will continue and close the public hearing next Tuesday, which then does give the board the opportunity to begin to deliberate should it choose to do so next Tuesday. That concludes today's meeting. I thank everyone for being here, and also want to thank the county staff for the arrangements they made so that we could be here on the coast side for this important hearing. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.